want to reach a new audience, you should be aware that the right communication is key and choosing your partner becomes crucial. A project of expansion to international markets requires a long list of tasks and finds an answer in a one-stop destination solution, the only one capable of giving the right answers to the multiple challenges of reaching the desired markets. Save time, gain quality with AP Portugal Tech Language Solutions and its comprehensive range of high-quality linguistic and technological solutions that will deliver the right message to the right audience in any language.
Let's begin.
Get in touch.
Hello and welcome, everyone. I'm pleased to open ChatGPT in Localization 2, or just GPT in Localization, a provisionary name for the event before we rebrand it as large language models in Localization, something unwieldy to say. I'm very pleased to see you all today. People are beginning to join, and let me perhaps start with a few introductory words. The importance of today's event is to map what has happened in localization over the last 2 months since the huge wave of hype around OpenAI and ChatGPT. We ran the first event back then. Nobody was prepared. Nobody had any solutions. And this is changing now. So in today's event, we will have some practical and real stories of people who have begun to implement large language models, and particularly ChatGPT and GPT-4 in their workflows in an organizational scenario. Today, we have about 3 hours of content, and it's the first day. We begin with a panel of industry researchers, Florian Faes, Jaap van der Meer, and me, to cover the latest news in the industry and what we consider important to localization people. Then we have a panel, 3 stories from buy-side localization leaders who have carried out proof of concept pilot projects with GPTs and implemented them or not implemented them, but have hands-on experience with this technology. We proceed with a panel of the leading minds on machine translation and quality estimation, a sphere which is changing right now very fast due to the advent of the large language models, led by Olga Beregovaya from Smartling. Then we have 5 demos of translation tools that have integrated OpenAI, ChatGPT, or GPT-4 in the past 2 months, and we'll see different use cases and scenarios where it worked. And finally, we have the afterword about how it is, how important it is to communicate your value in the times of ChatGPTs and large language models. And that concludes day 1. On day 2, we have practical sessions, workshops, and a hackathon, which are with limited seats. So we implemented a small fee to only allow people who are really interested to join. It's practically sold out. There's maybe 20 tickets remaining, and we're going to attack different tasks from inclusive language, translation, content summarization, to creating marketing content from scratch. We'll be trying to make marketing content for Las Vegas betting company. Perhaps do something more useful for humanity afterwards. So it's going to be fun. So 3 hours today and 3 hours tomorrow. Before I progress to the first panel, I would like to run a poll to see who is joining us today. I see we have about 200 people in the room, so probably half of us is still joining. Let's see how you're feeling about generative AI and who has joined us today in this online event. In the meanwhile, while you're voting and sharing your views, perhaps in the chat, maybe you can introduce yourself and say a few words in the chat. In addition to the poll, let me say a huge thank you to AP Portugal, who are running the technical part of this meeting, tirelessly moderating, setting up broadcasts, and making sure that this online event is a success. Thank you very much to the technical team. Now, I cannot see if many people have voted. So, Paolo, please let us know if we can already proceed and see what the day has brought us. How many have voted so far?
So we have still a few responses coming in. We are at about 77%.
37%.
Yes.
Let's go and share the results. I think it was going to be indicative of the whole room. Excellent. I see people in the chat waking up. The recording is going to be available instantaneously. We are streaming today to LinkedIn, to YouTube, where you can rewatch the event at any time. And of course, we're going to send a Zoom recording to all participants. Now, let's have a look at the results of the poll. We see that most people are excited and eager to use, optimistic about this new technology. So we're still in the peak of inflated expectations, and 27% of people said that they are using it every day and they have a practical approach. The fear was not very much expressed. 13% say wait and see, and 13% say that they are worried either about jobs or the AI taking all over the world. Excellent. And in terms of who we have today, we have a good percentage of buy-side localization professionals. Great to see you guys here. You're great. And we have a big percentage of language services providers. Always a pleasure. And now academia, technology companies, non-localization professionals are represented. And we have a small group of other and some freelancers. In the past event, I had received a little bit of criticism that we didn't have a voice of freelancers in the show. And so this time we've corrected the course, and I'm pleased to announce we have a guest of honor, Terence, a linguist and a software developer who is going to present a CAT tool that he has built immediately on top of ChatGPT. So stay tuned for the second part of the event when this is going to happen. All right. This was all in terms of introduction. And now let's welcome on the stage Florian Faes from Slater and Jaap van der Meer, the famous researchers of the localization industry. Gentlemen, hello.
Hello.
Hey. Hi, Konstantin.
I don't know if you need it in an introduction. I see we have a small percentage of people today who are not from the localization industry. So perhaps we begin with a very short 10-second, 20-second overview of what you do. Florian, why don't you start?
Yeah, looks like I'm the only one with the news background, which
we're going to fix that right now.
All right. Yeah, so let's do the news panel. Well, thanks so much for hosting me today and this panel, Konstantin. Really appreciate it. So much to learn. This is going to be really useful for me as well, and I love that you guys are putting this up on YouTube. So thanks. So Slater, we publish day-to-day news, research, about the localization, translation industry, machine translation industry. We do advisory. We do host our own conference called SlaterCon, and I do a podcast on a weekly basis. So we churn out a lot of content that I hope people find useful. I'm based here in Zurich, and we have a distributed team almost all around the world.
Awesome. Glad to have you with us. Is it the first time you and I, we have a panel together?
Virtual, yes, but I mean, you always ask the good questions at the in-person SlaterCons back in the days. Yeah,
this has happened, but today is our first panel in this scenario. So something new, something which we try for the first time. Yep. What about you? You're an industry pioneer. You started when there were no CAT tools, and it's been a huge journey. How do we perceive you now?
Well, first of all, we have the King's Day here in the Netherlands, so I'm decorated with a little flag here. Apologies for that. I still have to join the newsroom, I see. But anyway, I think most people know my name. We started a think tank in 2005, talking about all the stuff that we're talking about today. We saw it coming. So delighted that the revolution is here today. It was a long time waiting. But in the meantime, I always say, laugh about Alain, who's still on the camera here and opening his lunch.
Language models. I think
He's opening a language model.
Only we can see Alain. The participants cannot see Alain.
Ah, okay, I see. Good. All right. Yeah. I was going to say we changed from a think tank to a data company a couple of years ago. So most people don't know us as a data company, but that's our main focus today. So we work with a lot of companies in the industry to collect data, clean data, annotate data, and we manage this very big data marketplace. So we're right at the heart of this revolution, I would say, in many ways. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much. For the attendees, please feel free to write in the chat. For your questions at the second part of this panel, we'll use the QA function. So if you'd like us to answer your question, type it in the QA and vote on the questions that you want to be answered first. And so we'll prioritize those as we go. All right. ChatGPT, GPT-4, and everything which is happening around this in the localization industry. 2 months has passed, maybe 3 months since the huge wave of hype, and people have been working hard. News are pouring in every day. Every week there is a new groundbreaking achievement or something which is positioned as such, threatening to turn our world upside down. How do we navigate this huge wave of news, this huge wave of hype, and how do we separate the gold from the substrata rock? Florian, what are the news, do you think, what are the most important news that has happened over the last couple of months? What has caught your attention?
Yeah, let's stick with the second point. What has caught my attention? Because it's very, very hard to kind of contextualize all of this. And one good place to start is to follow it if you aren't overwhelmed easily. I mean, it's just Twitter, right? I mean, there's so much going on Twitter. I had to mute a few accounts that kind of gave these like mind blow emojis like 3 times a day, but it's just a very good source. So maybe I just give you a quick overview of like 5 things that caught my attention over the past few weeks. That doesn't say that those are the most important ones, but at least it's kind of a starting point, I guess, for this discussion, right? So something that caught my attention literally today is Hugging Chat. Maybe some of you know that the Hugging Face, I actually struggled to put in a nutshell what Hugging Face is. And I listened to a couple of podcasts with the sole goal of just putting this in a nutshell, but it's basically a repository of open source models for machine learning, right? And anybody who's more experienced than me, please, I'm sorry for butchering this. But there's a lot of models hosted on Hugging Face, literally the emoji. And today they announced Hugging Chat, which is basically ChatGPT just by Hugging Face. And I'm assuming the underlying model is also open source. So this is it's quite big. We've been testing it for the past couple of hours. So far, it's not working as well as ChatGPT. We tested it with translation. I put in 3 paragraphs and it stopped midway. But the 1 paragraph that it did was actually fairly okay. But we're going to write a story about it tomorrow. So Hugging Chat literally came out today.
You want to show it to the participants how it looks like so that they have a visualization.
Just go Google Hugging Chat and go there.
If you don't mind, I'll show it for 10 seconds to illustrate your point.
Okay, hang on. Hugging Chat. Hugging Chat.
Just like ChatGPT, but from Hugging Face and Amazon.
Yeah, just you need to give me a second to actually pull up the link. I haven't gone there so often that it's automatically pulled up in my browser, and the search is failing. So 1 second.
I have it open if you'd like.
Got it now. So chat. So I share my screen, I guess. Hugging Chat. Boom. I guess you see my screen now?
Yep.
All right. So, well, I don't know. Let's take, what do we do?
Ask it, what is Slater or Why not?
What is later? Okay, that's a good one.
Not bad, no?
Yeah, not bad. We provide, okay, so now let's say translate this into German. So, I mean, I always try to keep it on the language industry angle
So it's
because
multilingual, right?
yeah, let's see how it does.
I don't speak German, so perhaps you can give
It's
us some-
good. It's good, and it works. So it kind of broke down the last couple of times we tried. Steigen Sie bitte. Okay, I mean, there's some. I don't have to do like kind of a live QA, but there's some like funny stuff here. But generally, okay, it was fast enough. Fluentish. But yeah, so it's another interface that you can use, and this one's for free, and seems like it has limited, not massively limited capacity, unlike OpenAI.
They probably don't have 100 million people knocking on their portal every second.
Yeah, not yet, right? Okay, so that is Hugging Chat. Moving on, so I stop sharing here. Check it out. Now, an interesting story that we picked up is about a week ago, a company called The Newswire out of Canada launched a press release or published a press release that they integrated ChatGPT or GPT-4 into their workflow, allowing for like English to Quebecois French machine translation of press releases. Now, in itself, not a huge piece of news, but kind of the first time a company singled out the translation use case in a paid press release, right? And of course, interestingly, it's actually a press release service, but they could have gone for any other off-the-shelf MT engine. They chose this one, and they followed up with us saying actually they tested a couple others and found this one to be the best. So yeah, that felt a bit of a watershed moment in terms of this becoming a lot more public. Then what's happening, I mean, is on the research side, and that's where, Konstantin, you're probably even more up to speed, and we have, Christian and Alan and all the other great researchers on later in this conference. But kind of MT researchers are testing all kinds of things that can be done with these large language models. So, for example, MTQE, so quality estimation, according to Microsoft, state of the art. And it's a lot of stuff being tested there. This week, I think it was a couple of days ago, there was even another paper by Microsoft where they basically revisited the concept of document level machine translation, but not using large language model, but referring to large language models, of course, now incorporating document level context. So if we, in the narrower models, we need to step up our game because there it's still kind of mostly sentence level. And document level machine translation has been around for a long time. Like Samuel Loibley wrote about it like 4 or 5 years ago, but it appears not to be a solved problem yet, right? Then there's also a lot of machine translation, LLM machine translation research coming out of China, like Tencent. We actually did kind of a summary piece about that. And they played around with these prompts, all of these different prompts, right? They like basically pretend you're a machine translation system, and then apparently the quality becomes better, which is hilarious.
We'll talk about it in the prompt hackathon. If you tell it the role, it actually becomes better at what it does. So it's a role-playing game with the computer all the time.
I find this, and we should talk about this afterwards with you as well. I find this the single most fascinating part of this whole thing so far. And, I played around with a bunch of prompts, so we can talk about that later. They obviously, they being the researchers, did it very kind of quantitatively and much more structured than, me just punching in something in ChatGPT. Then also there was an interesting case study that somebody, a company called Mind Your Language, LSP based in Hong Kong and Singapore, ran on our website recently, where they asked their client base for if they should integrate or not ChatGPT in their Brand Guardian product, which is a copy editing product that they do, service. And like the overwhelming majority said, yes, I need this. Like 82% wanted ChatGPT integrated into their human editing service, so they have a choice, etc. So basically, clients definitely want the option now of having this in a language service / product. right? And then finally, something I've read a week ago or so, maybe even less, is that Reddit is now starting to charge, or at least is pulling up the option of charging people for their data downloading API. I don't know how it was before, but apparently it's a big deal. Because of course, Reddit is like probably the biggest repository of like conversational data out there that some of these large language models are trained on. Now, how is this relevant for the language industry? I don't know, maybe the LSPs could benefit from their access to highly proprietary and sometimes confidential textual data. And I'd love Jaap's take on this, of course, because he's the expert on that. But, we've collected a lot of data that OpenAI can't scrape, can't get to. And, maybe there's a potential here for the industry as a whole to monetize this. So these are the four or five things I've seen over the past couple of weeks.
Amazing. Yep, let's continue to you. Perhaps take the data lead.
Yeah, well, I'm not going to list examples of all this news to you because I can't keep up with that. There is too much. As you said, every couple of hours there's a new announcement, and it's very hard to filter the real from the fake, and what is really valuable and innovative, and what is just people checking the box and say, oh yeah, we also have an integration with a large language model with ChatGPT. There's a lot of that too. But what I find interesting is to listen to our customers, the people we meet every day, we work with every day. And that also tells me that there's something big happening, because projects are frozen, budgets are frozen. It kind of started happening, I guess, a little bit in the aftermath of the big rounds of reorgs, the layoffs, and it's hard to distinguish, what was first and is it related or. But we've been talking to the heads of big machine translation teams within supplier organizations, and when you ask them, "What do you think? Will you still have your job in 6 months from now?" They honestly don't know, because they simply don't know. Everything is so uncertain at the moment. The heads of the organizations are being replaced, they're new executives, and nothing gets decided until there's more clarity about where this whole thing will lead us. And that's the same from the big buyer organizations, the big tech companies, as well as the big suppliers. So my bet is that there's a lot of bad news still coming out. I think a lot of companies are already affected in our industry. I don't know if you pick anything up from that front, Florian, in all your discussions, but I think a lot of companies are already seriously affected financially as well by what's going on at the moment. So from that perspective, I've been initially downplaying all of this a little bit. You heard me even say that last week, probably, but I'm coming around, and the reason I was downplaying it a little bit is because initially I said, well, this is more of the same. We talked about this last year, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, definitely in Taos, in our events, in our meetings with our members in the old days. It was all about data and NeuroMT and how it would change. And nothing really happened. I was appalled very often that people in the industry didn't pick up on all this. And now it's happening. And essentially, we're still not talking about machines that are more intelligent than 2 years ago. It's just the massive skill. It's the size of everything. That was something we couldn't imagine. And that's what is changing the game now. And so, yeah, I've come around and I say, this is as big as the invention of the printing press. It's a paradigm shift, and we'll see huge impacts of this coming.
So
don't ask me about the daily news. I look at the bigger picture and listening to the signals we're getting from the people we work with every day, and based on that, I say, yeah, this is big.
I'm very scared now because it's like more for AI, less for the rest of us.
No, that I don't believe. I don't think so. No, there's plenty to do for us, but we just have to reinvent ourselves. Yeah.
But
I like
don't
this
you
note.
think that maybe the impact is most, or the freeze and the general kind of anxiety might be more centered around the tech-only companies, like the machine translation companies that have felt, in a sense, in the driver's seat for the past 5 years, while the service people were like, oh my God, these guys are going to kind of automate us away. And now there's this giant new thing that requires quite little tweaking to perform really well, that's now threatening the guys that have been kind of tweaking those narrower models for years. I don't, because from the services side, I haven't really felt a sense of dread or panic so much. It's a little more, yeah, kind of useful, kind of doesn't really work massively at scale yet. And of course, I'm really excited about seeing some of the use cases that we're seeing in this conference now, right? But hasn't been a massive sense of like panic or something. A lot of the CEOs have told me like, well, some clients have asked, we obviously offer it in kind of a proactive move. So I felt like maybe the services people were quite well prepared because they had been dealing with the automation wave for a while now.
Yeah. Let's see what will happen over the next 3 months. But I have the sense that there is more happening than what we hear, sort of publicly. But it's a threat to basically every function in our ecosystem, the MT departments, but also what about the tooling that we're using, have been using so much until now, the TMS, the CAT tools, do they still have a role to play? More and more companies will now switch to what is being referred to as an MT first strategy, relying on machine translation first. In many ways, as I said, I've been sort of disappointed about the lack of uptake in the industry. I would think that most stakeholders in our industry don't have their data in order for this revolution. And that's essential because these large language models won't do it alone. If you want to be a serious player in the proper sort of content, multilingual content space, you have to add your own knowledge in the form of your data to the equation. And that means that you need to move your data into this new era, meaning that you have to have it in the format of embeddings and being able to make it really searchable and combinable, so to say, with large language models, so that you can add your own knowledge and get better working systems for your customers. So that is a huge backlog, because I would speculate that about 90% of the stakeholders in our industry don't have their data in order for that transformation. So that is already a huge challenge. And then as these MT, as you just shown there, I mean, if it works so well, what are you doing with all the tools and the technology that you have currently running in your operations? Do you still need that? So it's quite fundamental.
I could perhaps continue this line. So in technology, of course, there is a big push. And what I heard from my side is LSPs reaching out to say, how do we become future-proof? How do we make large language model, ChatGPT based services in the future? That's the ask. The TMS are all becoming prompting platforms. I will probably show for 10 seconds what is a prompting platform. Now, let me perhaps demonstrate, because prompt engineering is a big trend. And so to answer this trend, a few platforms has sprung up, right? So a prompting platform is something very similar to a TMS, right? So it connects to the models and it gives the linguist the ability to work in some workbench. So for example, here we are engineering a prompt for a rewrite, and we can engineer it time after time. The linguist works on this one, and the engineer integrates the result into the application. And these things have become built into TMS, into any application you can imagine. This one is called Promptitude. There is another one called Prompt Layer, more geared towards developers. Another company called Steamship got $10 million in investment. There is yet another one called Prometheus, but the principle is all the same, right? So the linguist or the prompt engineer, which is practically the same role, works in one environment, and they iteratively improve the prompt to make it as good as possible, but also to cut the cost. Because when we work about thinking about the enterprise scenario, we need to think about 10 million words, 20 million words, right? You make something to rewrite your website to make it more inclusive. Imagine if you have 100,000 pages. So you tweak the prompt a little bit, and the cost difference is colossal. Could be a few times. Then the models are coming up. Florian, you've demonstrated the Hugging Face, but there's also German Aleph Alpha, French NLP Cloud, Cohere, Cerebrum. More than 100 different models have hit the market, and many of them are open source. So there is this Dolly 2.0. There's LMCs. Facebook is particularly big on open sourcing the models. So this path is created by ChatGPT, but now engineers can navigate the big elephant in the room, the security of the data. We don't want to give out data away to OpenAI. We want to keep it inside our contours. So people can now take an open source model because everyone's talking about it. They can finally come up and say, hey, let's do this. And they can download it, adapt it, and make it work. So the tools are going really, really fast. In the localization industry, we only see TMS, which are adopting prompting interfaces and integrating it. But I think that the LSPs and the in-house buy-side teams, they will take up the tools made for developers. These prompting platforms will become something that people will learn in the next 3 to 6 months. So that's probably my take. Sorry, I got carried away a little bit by things swirling in my head. Let's move on to the second item. Where do you see the impact and the uptake by the localization industry? So 2 months have passed. What's the most important thing that concerns us? What are the signs that we are using it or not using it?
I don't know. I mean, you just mentioned with the kind of the productivity tools, TMSs, etc. Integrating this. I'm not as close to this day to day as you are, and I think if they are, that will be one of the biggest deals so far of integrating. So maybe you share a bit more about how that works in practice, like in real life. Like
are they going
now?
to share it today at an hour and a half from now? They're going to have.
But do you know if it's already? Is it like in production day to day? I mean, like linguists are somewhat conservative people sometimes, right? They have a lot of skills, but kind of quick uptake of tech across the broadest possible segment of linguistics isn't one of them. So like how that would take a lot of time and adjustment to now basically move from a CAT tool using, here's my source, here's my target, implement it, maybe like now, of course, with post editing and all of that, to becoming a prompt engineer. Like how would that work? Give us an advanced hint there, because that would be the biggest in kind of the narrower localization translation industry, in my view.
Right. Well, I don't want to take too much space, because if you rev Kostya up, you cannot stop him, right? This has happened before. So please give me a sign that I'm getting carried away. But all the large LSPs now have some prompt engineering teams, people inside, right? So, and this is going to transition also to the buy side. I think prompt engineering is not going to be a super difficult skill. Lots of people will learn it fast. A few will know it on an expert basis, but I think it will become very widespread, like using Excel.
Okay, let me ask you up something. So the whole prompt engineering. I mean, if we have to tell the system like, hey, pretend to be a clinical trial translation system, English into whatever, Chinese, like, why would you even need to prompt this? Wouldn't it just automatically detect that, write that prompt, and just be a better MT tool?
It would, but then every time you have a specialized text, you have a glossary, a style guide. you take a style guide and you rewrite that style guide into a set of dominant commands. Do this, don't do that, do this, and you shorten it up because the model can only take so much before it breaks. And with these small changes, like you would call a health professional this way, you would call an annual report this way, you would say revenue, not turnover, something like this. So you can put all those things in it, and ideally it changes. From my practice, when we train machine translation models, if you go with Google, Microsoft, and you have some kind of hallucination, which is a common problem, right? If you want to change it afterwards, after you've trained the model, it's not so easy. It takes you some science, some playing around with data, and doesn't always work. So very difficult to adjust on the fly. Some companies like MordenMT, Amazon, they have on the fly adaptation, which might work, might not work. But with this large language models and prompting, changing has become really much easier. And this is a big differentiator between the old machine translation, or I don't want to say legacy. Yeah, what was the word that you came up in your webinar? What
legacy
was
machine translation.
Traditional machine translation, right?
Oh yeah, maybe. But yeah, you get carried away again, Konstantin. Florian,
Okay,
let's ask Jaap, and you answered. But anyway, doesn't matter. We were going to talk a little bit about the impact on the industry as well, and I was wondering what you guys think, because of course, as I said, I think all of this was already happening. It's just the size and the skill, and we don't have suddenly thinking machines. It's still machines that simply do string prediction and had this, fascinating if using Google Mail or Gmail, and how the email is written for you. It's always a little bit ahead of you. That's basically what these large language models do as well, but at a massive scale again. But the enterprises have been resisting a lot of the change over the last couple of years. Will that change now? I mean, they feel threatened by things like copyright, data privacy, and the whole risks, of getting these hallucinations and fatal errors in the output in their communications with the market. Do you think that will change now? Because the revolution is so big and the results are so amazing. I think so. I think it will go more rapid now. I mean, that's the whole point here, that it has been imminent for some time, but now nobody can hold it much longer. So the trade-offs will be made. We are going for more competitive organizations, and we're going to adopt all this AI and this technology, still slowly from an enterprise perspective, but I think it will happen. But what are the challenges then on the supply side as well as on the buy side? I mentioned one thing. I think people don't have their data in order, and it's vital. To get better results out of these LLMs, you have to find a way of adding your own knowledge, being your own data, to this mix here. So you have to organize that. And another big challenge I see in our ecosystem is the way we manage quality. Yeah, it's still very much an afterthought. It's informal, it's ad hoc, and we don't have a systematic way of monitoring the output. And that is, of course, what most people will be most concerned about now. Like, how do we make sure that what we get out of these machines is at least not going to damage our business? So yeah, there is now a lot of talk about quality estimation, quality prediction. That's AI-driven quality control. I think that will take also a tremendous flight now. And but again, big change for our industry.
Yep, the audience just loves you. You have you seen all those hearts and thumbs up?
Was that for me?
That was for you.
Oh, maybe it's for the king,
We are approaching the last quarter of our time allocated for this panel. Florian, why don't you select us a question from the pool of QAs?
Okay. Let me see. with so many. So maybe Silvio Piccinini said, a bit specific or off topic, but curious to hear your thoughts about how quality of translation will be evaluated. Will this change from a people task to a LLM assisted task to a fully LLM task, especially because Florian liked the German translation, but it wasn't perfect. I think that's what everyone's furiously working on right now, right? And there's companies that have been in this space before. I mean, of course, Unbubble is very strong, Model Front's been very strong. And now Microsoft did a lot of testing on and Taos, right? Yeah, correct. Jump in there. So why don't I pass it off to you? Sorry, pick one where you're the expert.
Well, yeah, Silvio, you know what we think about that, and for everybody, yeah, I think it's becoming an automated task for 99% probably. You know, flagging where there are potential areas or where you have to pay a bit more attention, and then the human gets involved. But absolutely, there's no other way, because with these LLMs, they're going to translate everything, or maybe they don't even translate things anymore. We just generate all this content in multiple languages, right? I mean, it's fundamental, as we said. For many of the content streams, we may skip translation altogether. But still, you want to have a quality check on that, and you can't do that with human labor, with humans in the loop. So you have to rely on these trained models to do your quality prediction and quality estimation. Absolutely.
Constantly, if I may, there's one that I want to just pick up on. Santiago Cuartas asking, sounds like it's early days as far as the impact, but are you generally optimistic or pessimistic about the effect on the localization industry? Now, let's unpack the two, and then also what Job just said. Job said maybe there's parts where like we actually don't do translation at all anymore, and this is something I would want to throw in there because it could be potentially pessimistic, but potentially also very optimistic for the industry. So right now, it wasn't really possible to generate content like with bullet points, right? So for example, just this morning, I was like, hey, you know, here's 10 bullet points, write a blog post about X. And then I could, of course, ask it to write a blog post about X in German, in French, in Chinese, and whatever, right? Now, what's that going to do to the industry? Is that, I mean, generally this generation of multilingual content from scratch, which wasn't an option even like 6 months ago, really. I mean, there were some tools out there that were useless. Like I was subscribed to a few of them, but they didn't help me at all. But now they're actually useful. So you could argue that, well, a lot of the translation or some of the translation that fulfilled that function is going to go away. But what about this, like, what must be a giant explosion of content now in languages other than English, or including English, that needs potentially some review? And who's going to do that review, right? So, I mean, this is in a sense a kind of post-editing. So I don't know. I'm just putting that out there. Like, is this going to be net negative or net positive? Because there's just going to be so much more content out there that even if a tiny fraction of it requires a human in the loop, then, you know, I guess we'll be safe. Because the concern here is, I mean, the concern generally is about jobs and all these expert linguists here, right? And there's, of course, for much of the industry, I guess the automation is a bit of an afterthought. Like, yes, there's maybe 10,000 people working on kind of machine translation, but generally the concern is maybe about the million linguists that are, you know, their livelihood depends on this. So yeah, just throwing this out there.
Yeah, there will be content workers, multilingual content workers, but their jobs will be so different. That's
or maybe sure. Cooler. Aren't they already different? Like, I mean, who isn't doing like expert in the loop translation now? I mean, how many people are still doing like the good old kind of Trados, you know, source segment, empty segment type, taking it slowly, doing a couple of Google search? That workflow is kind of disappearing anyway.
Yeah, post editing. You've heard me. Anyone who heard me speak before, I've been sort of very, very critical of that and said it's just not the end game. You know, it's temporary that we do that because it's nonsense, of course, and it's so insulting almost for the professional linguist to correct a machine. I mean, that's a complaint that a lot of people have made, but it's absolutely true. You don't want to do that anymore. So there's much more effort going into the preparation of these machines and teaching and training these machines, and then using similar smart models to check the output, and then work on improving the machines. For a lot of the content, for sure. There will always be, of course, use cases where we want full human involvement. Anyway, yeah, as we've seen in other revolutions, through the in our history, that never ends in less jobs, always in more jobs. We just have to reinvent everything, and but not only in the translation industry. I mean, I heard somebody talk about GPT as general purpose technology, and how it changes every organization. All this tacit knowledge that is hidden in organizations now through the large language models, gets opened up, and it will remove a lot of middle management jobs, because everything becomes accessible and automated, not just in translation or in content generation, but think about convergence that will lead to very interesting innovation with the customer support space, or with marketing. Of course, that's already happening everywhere. So it has a huge effect, and translation will probably not be recognizable as an isolated or standalone industry.
I have an anecdote about this. Here with me, I have a hoodie from AI Aesthetic, one of the world's first companies where the boss is GPT-4. A guy went on a social network, said, I'm going to work 1 hour a day for 30 days. I'm going to give it $1,000, and I'm going to build a company which is ruled by GPT-4. Whatever decision it makes, good or bad, I stick with it. So he became, of course, a viral sensation. I bought a hoodie. It's arrived safely. He raised, I don't know, $100,000 to $200,000 in money, and sold hundreds of those hoodies all around the world. And so we already can see a GPT-4 as a boss rather than a worker.
Yeah.
We're running out of time. Let me ask you the final question for today. What do you think localization people should do? LSP, buy-side localization team, what's their course of action? What is your recommendation for the next 3 to 6 months? I'm sure by September the world will be different, but what do we do in the next couple of quarters?
I guess my recommendation would be basically paradoxical. One would be wait and see paired with frenetic testing. Don't get left behind in terms of understanding what's happening here and testing things and going on the hugging chat and going on the hugging chat tomorrow and whatever, right? The next big thing. But probably I wouldn't lock into anything major yet. If there's somebody who wants to sell me something and lock me in for a year, I probably wouldn't do that. So yeah, kind of wait and see, but furiously test and stay kind of up to date here.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Oh, I think it's such a challenge, and difficult not to get affected by all the hype, because there's too much hype, and it will probably take another couple of months before that settles down. So be careful, but be real about it. So don't sort of defend yourself or isolate yourself because you don't trust all that hype. You have to see through that, and so you really have to study that. If your life and work is depending on this, then you have to take it seriously and go for the change now. I mean, there's no way you can stay behind.
Amazing. Thank you very much. Gentlemen, it's been an honor and a privilege to be with you on the same panel. I hope we can make one more sometime in the future. Your insight is much appreciated, and I see that the audience is very happy. with the first panel. Thank
Lots
you.
of hearts flying. Hearts back. Thank you.
Good luck. Good luck with the conference. Yeah. Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
It is now my pleasure to introduce the buy-side panel with the moderator Mirko Plitt, a computational linguist in the World Health Organization Academy in Geneva. Mirko, how are you today? Today you're on mute.
Yes, I completely lost my voice. I'm good, thank you. Busy day, but good busy. Yeah, like Jaap just said, you know, it's not because we've got ChatGPT that we don't have to chat ourselves for some reason.
Perfect. All right, let's start. I'll co-moderate with you. Let's ask the panelists to come on stage and please take the lead.
Yes, so we've got three guests at our panel today. So who I would prefer to introduce themselves. So maybe starting, you know, the old-fashioned way with a lady on the panel. Indira, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me here, Konstantin. And it's so exciting to be a part of this discussion. Everyone, I'm Indira Lorenzo, Director of Localization here at Flow. Yeah, I'm looking forward to tell you about our findings with GPT and the use cases that we've taken, that we've tested it with.
Indira, what is Flow Health?
Flow, yeah, thanks. I should start from there. Flow is one of the most popular apps in the health and fitness sector. It's a women's health app whose mission is to empower women and accompany them through their entire reproductive cycle. And its goal is to, like I said, empower women and people who menstruate through information to better understand their bodies. And so also with personalized insights and chats and information that's customized to the point that they're in their life, regardless of whether they are tracking the cycle, trying to conceive, monitoring their pregnancy, in the middle of menopause. And so our role in localization is expanding that mission to women who don't speak English.
Right, thanks, Indira. Maybe Michael next. Michael, is it Leveau or Levitt? How do you pronounce your last name?
Levat, thank you, Mirko. Hi, everyone. I'm Michael. I'm the head of localization here at Canva. Canva is a visual communication tool. You can do everything from creating presentations to creating marketing material in a graphic design fashion. So yeah, I'm really excited to be listening to and speaking to everyone on the panel and the audience today.
Thanks, Michael. And last but not least, Søren from Microsoft. Would you like to introduce yourself briefly?
Yes, thanks a lot for having me. Really a pleasure to be and an honor to be on this panel. Thanks, Konstantin. And I'm working for a company that is not run by ChatGPT. I still have good old-fashioned human managers and skip-level managers. I'm working on marketing pages that where we sell Microsoft 365. So I'm doing that for international markets. And I'm pretty close to the whole ChatGPT thing, just because Microsoft has a big stake in OpenAI, and so we see a lot going on in that space. Very close position, I should say.
Right, thanks, Søren. So fantastic panel. Maybe some of you in the audience wonder what's the common denominator here. And I think from what I understand is that each of the three of you have already led pilots around using ChatGPT as part of your actual business needs. So beyond exploring, as Florian just said, already piloting this technology. So if each of you could maybe describe briefly what you have been piloting, maybe starting with Michael.
Yeah, absolutely. I've prepared a few slides, and I'm going to run through them very quickly, if you don't mind. My company makes slides, so I feel the responsibility. And I'm going to take the opportunity to also run you through the journey, because I think it's a little bit relevant. I'm going to start by saying that we are doing the obvious thing, which is using large language models in localization, but we also have large language models operating in our product. And probably the bigger part of what we're doing as a localization team is internationalizing large language models to be safe and useful for our customers. And we're also deploying these products as internationalization or international friendly features for our users. So when large language models first burst into everyone's consciousness, or at least into my consciousness, what we were expecting looked something a little like this. So this is sort of our initial state before they burst onto the scene, where we're thinking about where machine translation fits into our localization program, volume on the vertical axis here, content sensitivity, or how important it is that content is accurate and appropriate on the horizontal axis. You might think user-generated content is right up in that top left-hand corner. Something like marketing is in that bottom right-hand corner. We're using machine translation for user-generated content. We're using something like transcreation or TEP for our marketing content. What we expected from large language models when the hype was brand new was something like this, where machine translation all of a sudden is capable of taking over huge new swathes of content and reviewed machine translation is able to take over even larger and perhaps even displace full TEP. I heard Yarp and some people in the audience displaying their distaste for that, but I don't think it's such a negative thing, at least from the buyer side, because that would free up our budget to do much more transcreation or really in-depth focused things with that same budget. I don't think our budget would decrease. We would just focus in on more impactful areas. Instead, what we've seen by piloting some of these things with large language models is that far from sort of displacing huge verticals of content, we've seen that they have very niche applications within each vertical. And I'm going to have a look at a couple of those in the future, but it looks something like this. In marketing, there are a few really promising avenues. In user-generated content, it's very promising indeed. And in some of the other areas, there are only small areas where it's really looking promising. So this is how we're using large language models. We're focusing on quality and automating some of our LQA. So what we did was we took the DaVinci base model and we trained it on 1,000 correct examples from our previous LQAs from 2022 and 1,000 incorrect samples. We did this across 30 languages, but 2,000 samples in total. And we provided basically the locale, the English or source sentence, and the translation and a label as to whether it was correct or incorrect. And what we saw, Yap was saying 99% efficiency. We didn't get quite to there, but prior to using large language models, we were seeing about an 8% yield, whereas if human reviewers were looking at translations, about 8% of those would contain errors and 92% would be fine and was wasted effort. Once we'd trained this large language model or fine-tuned this large language model, we were seeing that 76% of the segments being suggested were actually contained errors and only 24% were false positives where we were wasting that time. There was a pretty big spectrum in terms of performance. With Arabic, we had a really wonderful performance at 87%. An F1 score is kind of a blended score where you're looking at both how often it was predicting correctly and how many of the total errors it was finding. And Thai was at the other end of the spectrum. It was pretty close to what we saw with human review, which was interesting. Something that I'm particularly passionate about and that I'd like to see successful with these large language models is advancements with low resource languages. I think everyone has found that large language models performance really tails off with low resource languages, but I think there's reason for optimism as well. So we tried this same approach with Tamil, and while we didn't have enough data to be able to look at the false positive rate, we did find that it performed essentially equally well to the other models, identifying 92% of the errors in the test set, which is really suggestive, if not conclusive, as to how well these models are performing. And just very quickly, I think it's still unclear whether this will be a continuing trend with low resource languages. Looking at the Common Crawl database, which makes up the majority of what the OpenAI models are trained on. You can see at the top, there's languages like Russian, German, French, Spanish, which have around 5% of the total training data, and then lower resource languages like Indonesian, Thai, Urdu, and Tamil. And the results compared to what we saw with our fine-tuned data are all over the place. So I think it's still completely up in the air based on what we've seen, how this is going to pan out for low resource languages. And that's really exciting to me, because that's where I really see the value or the return on investment for machine translation, where there's a lower return on investment in terms of localization. That's where I'm going to leave it. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Michael. That's very interesting. So it's basically taking it's building up on the machine translation implementations that we've seen in the industry over the last several years, and you're just growing basically with what the technology is going to offer. Indira, do you have an implementation that is more built on ChatGPT already, or is it? Yeah. So tell us a bit about your pilot at Flow.
So, short answer to your question is no. So let me take you through the story. So, like I said, Flow's mission is empowering women and people who menstruate for information to get their bodies, to get to know their bodies better. And so one of the biggest challenges we have in localization is that the pace at which our wonderful content team create content is much higher than compared to the speed at which we can translate that content. We have a huge library with an incredible wealth of information that we want to make available to all of our users, regardless of what language they access the app in. And so essentially at the moment, or until very recently, if a piece of content wasn't available in a given language, it would simply not be shown. And so the result is that for some of our languages, the amount of information that our users could benefit from was compromised. And so in localization, we need to achieve feature parity and ensure that the coverage is comparable and we can bring all percentages to an even level. And so we needed to come up with something faster, and that was going to help us to allow people who don't speak English to benefit from that content that wasn't yet available through human translation. And so we started testing, obviously, with machine translation was the obvious thought that came to mind. And then we thought, hey, what if in the selection of custom machine translation engines that we chose for our tests, we also include GPT as part of the mix. And we run this across 6 different languages, 4 different content types, because we do expect a difference in performance across language pairs and content types, and see what it does. We will tell it that it needs to behave as a machine translation engine. So back to Florian's point earlier about how interesting it is on seeing the difference in the output with and without prompt engineering from GPT. We told it, you are Flow, you are all a series of attributes in line with our style guide. Your audience is female, you are performing as a machine translation engine, and then we gave it a condensed version of our glossaries and style guides. And so it produced outputs in the different languages that we asked it to. And so there was a lot of noise as well around this, but we wanted to make sure that medical accuracy was a priority, as you know, and as I mentioned earlier, with Flow Health, and a lot of our content is of a medical nature. And so the safety of our users and medical accuracy is not taken lightly. So we needed to make sure that we did as many rounds as necessary to measure both language quality and medical accuracy. And so we tested the linguistic quality of each of the different engines that we tested, including GPT. And from that part, what was really interesting, and that's what I'm really excited about, is that when across the 6 languages and the number of engines that we tested, GPT with prompt engineering gathered the most number of wins. And I insist in the overall number of wins. And a win is the lowest number of errors with severity weight assigned to those errors. Now, when digging deeper into the nature of those errors and the severity of those errors, we found that while GPT didn't gather the highest amount of errors, it did gather the highest amount of critical errors, particularly in areas related to accuracy. I should say that it was also not very far away from some of the other, as we know, traditional machine translation engines. And so what we did was take the 2 best candidates from the linguistic evaluation and take them through medical review with our doctors without telling them that this was machine translation output or GPT involvement. In doing this, the team followed the exact same tools and artifacts that we use to measure the medical accuracy of our English content. And so the results were pretty surprising. We got, out of our 6 languages, we've got 2 of them that had pretty low risk. So they didn't even comment, is this machine translation, which was amazing. But for the remaining 4, there were a number of risks. And there were medium to high risks where some of the errors reported were too high and meant that it was not yet viable for us, which means that we continue to test and we continue to find the best combination and the best model for us, potentially not yet in the GPT arena. We're in the middle of testing the idea of a proof of concept. And so our goal is to surface that library as fast as we can as an interim bridge for whenever human translation is available, and being transparent in where that comes from, so that users understand that the output might not be perfect, but we want to see what happens with that. At least that's the concept, that's the idea.
Interesting. Very interesting. Thanks, Indira. Of course, given my background, not the visual background, but at the World Health Organization, I feel reassured about the importance that you attach to accuracy in the health domain. Søren, I'm sure you already mentioned that Microsoft is actually, an important actor in the ChatGPT context directly. I'm sure you have probably more specific experience with ChatGPT in particular.
I do, although of course I cannot share some of the ongoing projects. So I'll keep it on a high level. There's obviously 2 different areas where ChatGPT is really useful for localization teams, any team working internationally. One is and we've heard about that, the whole process side, so content creation, right? As Florian earlier said, in many cases, translation has been basically a workaround because we couldn't create the content in other languages. By just looking at all the opportunities for content creation in different languages. People in the chat have pointed out that the quality is very different across languages and what's being generated. I've tried it with my native German, and some of the output is actually pretty good and comparable to what's being created in English. But I know that there's a lot of languages where we don't even have ChatGPT models, so it's not a fully scalable model. But content creation with very strong supervision. Yes, for the accuracy, as Indira pointed out, there are areas where you don't want to make mistakes. When we talk about marketing content, there's also the fact that those models have been trained on data up to a certain date, and then they're not completely updated. So we really have to take that with a grain of salt. So it often is more a tool for ideation. I've been working a lot with A/B testing. I mean, that's one of the areas where you can really come up with different variants very quickly. So kind of that whole area, content creation for pre-sales pages, for email campaigns. And I've also seen in the chat that there's even a company now offering like the multilingual creation of email campaigns, blog posts, and so on. So that is one area. The other area that Microsoft has already invested in, people have probably seen the Bing chat, people have probably heard about Copilot. So how do we create relevant customer-facing surfaces where we use ChatGPT, and that's obviously an area where I cannot reveal too much, but especially, and I mean that is not something new. Like there's a lot of new opportunities for bots, for chatbots, right? With real intelligence instilled, instead of just parsing out a few words and then trying to build an answer from that. Those models can get a lot more intelligent, and that is super, super interesting for everybody who's working in marketing, all the way from the awareness and information searching stages where customer is just looking at, oh, how does this product actually give me value for what I'm looking for? There's already opportunities there, but then all the way to onboarding, where you tailor the experience of users more to their needs, and then all the way also for their usage when they're using a product. Maybe they don't use certain features as much, and you can help them with that. So there's tons of opportunities to really instill intelligence in the customer journey itself. And I think that's something that marketing teams will probably take a very close look in general, because now it becomes a process where we don't just surface information, but we can pull more information from the users in a smart way, right? There have been tools like Wizards where people could tell, hey, this is something that I need. You have pages where you give people a lot of information, and they can select different options, but it's all being very primitive compared to what you can get from a user giving you more verbose input.
Thank you. Well, that's also interesting because you cover maybe a wider spectrum already of how this technology, or ChatGPT in particular, can be used. I mean, we all are only too aware of the hype around, or that ChatGPT has triggered. We were, you know, the context that frames this conversation is, of course, piloting these types of technologies. And I would be interested, Michael, for instance, in how far, you know, it looks quite elaborate what you put in place as a pilot to explore this technology, in how far you've actually been able to focus on doing the things that you said, and rather than, as in the past, having to sell this technology, actually to hold the horse's back of stakeholders saying, we want you to do something completely different, much more ambitious. We want to replace all the translators and so on. Is that, how do you manage that nowadays when you do pilots, when you explore these technologies, when everyone is so excited about what ChatGPT seems to be able to offer?
Yeah, I mean, it's a real challenge. There was a period of a few months where we would get people suggesting, oh, have you thought about using machine translation for some of these things? And it's like, yes, we have considered that, and it doesn't work as well as you might think. We're still fairly early in the journey. I think I'm fairly optimistic about using these things for localization quality assurance. We have some other pilots about to start that utilize the ability of large language models to utilize context. So for instance, with metadata, where you run into problems with ambiguous short terms, homographs, and polysemy and other issues. I suppose the flip side of the hype is that engineering resources are easier to get because the engineers are excited about this technology, and all of a sudden localization looks like a a low-hanging fruit to them. So Gurkhan was the wonderful data scientist who helped us with that pilot, and I'm not saying that he wouldn't have helped if it wasn't for the hype around large language models, but it was a pretty novel experience to have people coming to us excited to work on these use cases.
Thanks, Mike. What about you, Indira? Is it a challenge? Is it a new challenge to work with stakeholders within your organization who have, maybe sometimes also excessive expectations of what can be done with ChatGPT?
Not really. I don't think it's been a challenge for us at all. I think we're lucky that Flow is a highly innovative environment, and whenever there is the option to trying something new and that could help and boost the ability to translate more and in a high quality, I think it's an opportunity, and it was seen like that. When I first presented this to C-level, this is now over 6 months ago, the first reaction was like, yeah, great, let's try it, let's see what it does. It's about, let's test it. And if it fails, we will have learned that it failed, and then we iterate and move on. So not really, there's not been any pushback or challenging conversations we've had. Obviously, I would say that the biggest challenge is being around the scalability of a solution like this in the context of medical accuracy. That is probably for us the hardest challenge to overcome, that we kind of overlook, because like I said, the safety of our users is important, paramount to what we do.
Interesting. Soren, would you consider that this technology, if we come from a machine translation concept, of course we've been working with machine translation in our industry, with artificial intelligence for probably longer than most other sectors in even in the tech industry. We're probably more used to working with some type of but very specialized technology, that translates sentence by sentence, and now we're getting to something that's more generic. Do you see from your experience that ChatGPT actually adds a level of uncertainty where we lose, say, in terms of accuracy, reliability, predictability of technology if we scale up the implementation of this technology?
No, I think that days like today will help with keeping expectations realistic, right? I think that the industry at large really needs to understand what can ChatGPT do and what is not really feasible. And I think that from what I've heard so far, I think there's, when you were asking the question about the stakeholders, I think there's less expectations now that it's, like, I think with machine translation, sometimes the hype was bigger, that idea, and Michael, I loved the visualization that you showed of kind of, how could we move these things? Like, how can machine translation just basically do everything at some point, and then maybe we just keep some of the marketing content protected, but everything can be moved there. I think there's been a lot more hype around that at the time, that when people felt like, Neural is now at full human parity, we can do that. I think with ChatGPT, people are really trying to figure out things. And I think that it has been helpful. I don't like the word hallucination. I would prefer fabrication. It sounds so dangerous when the machine starts hallucinating. Is it on drugs? Is it asleep? What is going on? People are aware of these fabrications and the odd output. It's been helpful, actually, that people see some of the restrictions of these models and don't go into the technology like expecting miracles, what it can do for us. I think there's an enormous amount of potential. I think that probably everybody who's attending this conference is these talks is expecting that it can do really great things. But I think there's less of this, this will replace all translators. This will replace all localizers. I think that and that way, I think we can move forward in a much more realistic way, and find good applications for it. And I mean, there is a lot of valid concerns beyond the fabrications, right? There's how old are the training data? What's the bias of training data? There's the whole question of how, like the prompt engineering obviously is a very big topic, but then there's privacy concerns. There is talking about the guardrails that are in place, that certain content is basically already from the system, is restricted by the system. There's obviously the cost. It's not free, right? When you're using these models, there is some cost associated with it, although a lot of people are using free models, but at some point, those need to be financed as well. So lots of interesting questions around that.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Søren. So, Indira, would you be able to share already maybe first, couple of recommendations to others who are willing now to make that step and pilot these technologies? What is it that people should start with?
I think the very first thing that I really want to say is that in the last couple of months, we've I've heard lots of and I've been at lots of webinars talking about GPT and localization. What is the risk? What's going to happen to translators? And there's this vibe of threat, right? And what's going to happen to linguists, and are they going to disappear? I think that the very first thing we need to do is remember that, our industry went through this with translation memories. It went through it again when machine translation became a hype, and it went through it again when machine translation became neural. I think we're at the edge of another new era and another new, localization point, another version. And like it was said earlier, we have to take it as strength, as an empowering tool that can make our job better. It's not a replacement. It's how do we redefine the value that we have to offer with a tool as powerful as this? Once that mindset is changed, then we can move on. That's the very first thing we need to do, both in our teams, with the stakeholders that we work with, and also with the linguists that we rely on. Their involvement in this is as important as ours and as our stakeholders. And the redefinition and them being on board for becoming the new generation of prompt engineers, or the new enablers of value for a non-English audience, is absolutely primary, the way from where I'm sitting. So those are the very first things. Get everyone on board in the right mindset. And then we've also heard recently, give it 6 months, wait. Well, my view on that is test, don't wait. This is a very powerful tool that is evolving on a daily basis or on a minute basis. And I think it's important that at least we give it a chance, and we, think outside of the box and think, how could we use this in a way that can make our work more meaningful and more impactful? The reality is that most, large corporations, as we know them in our industry, are still very English-centric. And chances are that the amount of, or the quality of the non-English experience of that product might not be identical, or might not be at the same quality. It might be the case. And so tools like this can make our job a lot more meaningful, to ensure that non-English speaking users come to the same level as English, development can happen at the same time, tests and data can be surfaced at the same time in both English and non-English, and development is essentially at parity level. That is super important. And also my third point would be, don't think of ChatGPT in the context of localization restricted to machine translation. There's so many more things that it can do. As Michael has a great use case on language quality. We can also look at editing the source, or tweaking in the context of post-editing, if you like, tweaking the translation for a different audience, for us, in the case of Flow, aside from the medical accuracy challenge, this would have been a great win. We have our experience can be, like I mentioned, we have different user journeys subject to what the user wants to achieve. But there's also, we have a teenager track for our youngest users. And so maybe the language can be adapted for those users to make it more relevant. Traditional machine translation engines cannot do that. Humans can, but not at scale. So how about we pair those two and we allow and unlock the ability to do that? Also, language inclusion. This is one of the challenges that we have at Flow. Our audience is primarily feminine, as in is formed by individuals who identify as women, but there's also people who menstruate who might not necessarily be binary and identify as women. And so what if we could use ChatGPT to turn our content into more inclusive language and reflect that in our translations? Machine translation engines, as we know from the traditional era, cannot really do that. So there's a wealth of opportunities out there. And that's why I'm so optimistic about this. And that's why I've been a little bit frustrated with the vibe of the conversations that have been happening recently around GPT and localization. It's makes sense to be conservative. Yes, there's a lot of hype at the moment, but there's also a huge opportunity. And I think that we need to see that.
Thank you, Indira. Michael, what would be your like key takeaways that you would share as recommendations with people who want to launch into piloting or at least exploring, testing ChatGPT or similar, of these technologies now in a localization context?
I think Indira said really, really well, and I echo the same sentiment that I think the framing of this within buyer-side companies, that's what I can speak about, should be, hey, what are we spending time on and money on now that we can potentially speed up, that we can automate, yes, and potentially give more of that work to the machines so that we can focus more on the things that are truly having impact. And I know we spend a huge amount of time with really long form, high volume content. And I mean, the translators on the call can tell me whether that's a really engaging form of occupation compared to something like really thinking carefully about how to get a message across with a part of a user experience within software, or working with marketing content that really needs to reflect a brand and that needs to get across a very complex idea. I certainly get more energized by those latter kinds of challenges, and I feel like if we can put more of our time as individuals and as humans into those, then it'll be a more engaging occupation, a more engaging industry for us to work in, than if we're spending a lot of our time doing things that, at least our external perspective is, can be automated.
Thanks, Michael. Søren, I'm sure you have. It's also interesting. I mean, I'm sure you have longer experience also piloting, exploring other technologies. Is there something that is radically different how people should approach piloting this technology compared to previous technologies? Again, in having in mind that this could help people here in the audience to draw inspiration, how to conceive, how to come up with pilots or tests of these technologies.
Well, I think a lot has already been said. I think that the focus should really be on thinking of this as a tool that helps creating content, more so than, I already said that in a way, translation has, for many forms of content, just been a workaround. It was a lot easier to create the content in English and then translate it into all those other languages. And we've used TMs, we've used machine translation, neural machine translation to just optimize that process. But for marketing content, for health-related content, right, there's the cultural dimension. There is like the age component that Indira pointed out. We can personalize content so much more now if we have a tool when we have a tool like this. Large language models, I mean, they're great with language, and in a way, we're all in the business of getting content to customers in very different markets, and I feel that that's the value add of translators has always been to understand the target markets, not being able to replace words in one language with words in another language, right? So we want to tailor content for the markets that we're working with and working for. If we can use this new tool to do so much better, and that's what I believe, I think we will all be better off. And there's so many different content forms where you have these subtle differences, where like support content looks different when it's being written natively for a specific market. And a lot of that has been lost in translation so far. And I think we can really recreate a lot of those things. So I think that transcreation will become just a lot more important. A lot of translators will probably be more looking at how does this newly created content now work for the target market. It still needs to map to something that has that centralized branding in it, right? You don't want to deviate too much. But I think even the models in how people work in localization might change, with kind of more distributing to the individual markets than those on our buyer side, than those centralized teams. So yeah, I think there's tons of really great opportunity to use it that way. And that's why I'm saying, like, let's think about it more of a content creation tool in so many different ways than a tool that can just be inserted into translation.
Okay, thanks, Søren. So we do have a few questions. I'm sorry, I only noticed that now. We have 10 questions. So I'll read them out. I think from what I can see, many of them seem to be for Indira. So we start with you, Indira. What were the two language pairs that you classified as low risk in your trial?
French and Italian.
French and Italian? Okay. And do you find, I think this is also a question for you, but I may be wrong. Otherwise, the panel, please correct me. Do you find that prompts written in native language yield better results?
Great question. Yeah. Sorry, was there a second part of the question?
No, I think they give an example, French, their own example as an example.
Yeah.
They find that if they write it as native French speakers in French, they get different results.
That is a great question. And I wondered about this too, but we didn't get to test it.
Okay.
We were in the prompt engineering phase of our POC, we gave instructions specific to the language, but in English, with language-specific examples, if that makes sense. For example, when we were creating the prompt for a specific content type and a specific language, we gave a condensed, like I mentioned earlier, we also fed it with our style guide for that specific language, and that blurb had examples of the language, but the main instruction was in English. But it's a really good point, and it's unfortunately we didn't get to test it.
Interesting. Well, Søren, you and I, as native German speakers, I'm sure you've also done these tests. I've done this test as well. I have my own observations, but I'm not a panel member, so I'm not going to share them. But what is your knowledge or your experience with writing prompts in different languages?
I cannot say that I've done thorough testing on that. It's really more anecdotal. And I felt that, providing context information, I could prompt ChatGPT saying, then give me the output in German. And if I give enough context, I felt that the quality was good. But I have rarely tried to prompt in German and then compare that with the English one. But now I'm curious, Mirko, what your experience was.
I got the impression that the German was very well very good machine translation of an English response. I felt, but it's difficult to say whether whether underneath it there would be a translation process. I doubt it. But you do see that a lot of the training must have happened on data that was originally translated from English, which is the reality of the global or probably of the global training data out there, that a lot of it is either in English or translated from English.
Well, I've done tests where I've actually said, like, write in the style of this author. It's one of those fun prompt tests where you say, like, write in the style of Shakespeare. And I've done that with some German authors, and I felt that was pretty faithful. I mean, there's like certain signals that they use that, like, just throw in some famous quote by Goethe, and then it sounds like him. But there's definitely some training data relevant from like literature even.
Okay, thanks. I see Konstantin showing. I'm actually not sure about the where we are in terms of time. Do we still have some time to go?
5 minutes remaining, but if you want to finish earlier, because we've covered all bases, you have the opportunity. Otherwise, maybe 2 more questions and then wrap up.
Okay, then let's move to another question. So do you envisage that it is possible to overcome the confidentiality obstacles? I guess that relates to the privacy concerns around ChatGPT in particular, but maybe more generally, even in machine translation as well. As you know, it's not an entirely new concern. The use of artificial intelligence also in traditional machine translation and training processes. Because that stands in the way, so that's this question I'm reading out, that stands in the way of using artificial intelligence to work on highly confidential content. Don't know, Michael, if you have an opinion with your experience of working with your own data as well. I mean, training on your own data.
Yeah, the data we used was marketing data. We were going to pay to put it out in the world, so it's not too sensitive. But imagining that we were using user-generated content, how much, if you're an enterprise user of OpenAI or one of these other Google, there are agreements around the storage of that data and how it can be used. And then it comes down to how much you trust, sorry, Søren, but how much you trust Microsoft and OpenAI and Google. And I think that's a judgment for individual companies and individual consumers to make.
Okay. Thanks. And then a last question then on getting linguists on board. I think that was a bit your message, Indira, around how to also ensure that people see the potential for them to grow into different roles. Where's the added value? Is it really still in making sure that this word is translated exactly in that way, because that's how it's defined in the glossary or so. But how practically can we bring linguists on board and organize their reskilling?
I suppose the answer to that question depends on the reality for each localization team, whether we're talking LSP or we're talking buyer side. I can speak for the buyer side. The linguists that we work with who are part of our team are the first row of people that we need to get on board. They are the gatekeepers of language quality, and we need them on board. I think it's key. Positioning is key. And like I said, defining why we're doing this and helping everybody on board understand that GPT in this case would be an enabler and, if you like, a propulsor of their work rather than a replacement is absolutely key. If we're looking at from the LSP side, how to get translators on board from their big networks of freelancers, I suppose that would be a different conversation around pricing models and value add, and how do you qualify or disqualify the suitability of a linguist to a client or a project, I suppose. But yeah, for us, it's about explaining how does this new dimension in their roles, how is this new dimension in their roles linked to value add? How is it making their contribution more powerful? And also understand that it's not a replacement, because the reality is that wherever we can implement GPT or other technologies, it will be like Michael showed earlier, there's that content profiling, right? Every content has a different function, as we learned years ago from Taos as well in the dynamic quality framework theory. Every content type has a function, therefore they need to be treated differently. They might need different workflows and different solutions. So it's not like GPT is coming to replace and take everything away. It will be suitable for certain ranges of content, but there will still be the existing workflows that will continue to exist. So I think the why, finding the why is important.
Yeah, if I may add one thing here, because I'm looking a little bit at the chat. I think one of the things that we need to make sure is that translators don't get the impression that this is just another cost-saving measure and we're lowering word rates, and because the skill being needed, I mean, even for machine translation post-editing, I feel the industry hasn't necessarily come up with the best pricing models for that. So now the next step, and I can see that people might feel threatened and feel like, oh, this is just another post-editing job, and now with these models that are very fluent, they are often not accurate, right? But the quality in terms of, well, it also doesn't make spelling mistakes. So there's certain language mechanics are very well done. So if this is being sold to translators as, oh yeah, now we sell you like 1% of the regular rate because you don't really have that much to do, I think it will not fly. If we can really establish the process in a way that it is about accuracy, right? It is about making sure that texts are really good market fit. So the whole post-editing would need to be defined in a different way. And yes, as Indira said, it will so depend on the use cases. But I think that we will really need to think very hard about how would that be paid for, so that the linguistic resources really see that they get the interest in doing that work.
On this beautiful note, I think, Mirko, we can wrap up the panel.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you very much. So it's been a pleasure to listen to the three of you, and thanks for the openness in sharing your findings and your thoughts. I'm sure that will be we'll have well, actually we can see in the comments that there's a lot of excitement around what people have learned from this session. So thank you very much, and goodbye from me.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mirko.
Thank you.
Wow, that was amazing. We see the first pioneer use cases, implementations, testing. Mirko, thank you very much for bringing this panel to the light, to making it shine. And huge thanks to the panelists who joined. Michael joined from Australia in the middle of the night, and Soren joined in the earliest morning in the Pacific, if I understand correctly. So people made sacrifices to come here to discuss the use cases. We have a couple of minutes before the next panel, and don't yet see the moderator Olga with us. So let us run a poll and relax a little bit as we are preparing for the research side of things. Paolo, if you wouldn't mind, please bring up this second poll and let us click on this question. Do you already have a practical use case, by which we mean implementation, where it's working for you, whether it's in personal work on an organizational scale, or not quite yet? Let's vote on this and have a look what we come up with. In the meanwhile, what do you think? Write in the chat, how do you rate the session so far? Do you feel like you got valuable insights, and if you have your questions answered? More importantly, maybe these sessions have given you new questions to ask. Paulo, how are we on votes? Are we seeing participation? The poll disappeared. 10 out of 10. I'm very pleased to see this responses. All right. So we have almost 200 people voting, and the vote is split 40% not yet, and then almost equally for personal work and organizational skill. It is much better than last time. In the first webinar, in the first online event, we only had a small percentage of people who had experimented with large language models and generative AI in a business scenario, and things are picking up. So the localization industry is acting. We are not sitting on our hands. We see real involvement. Now we caught up on our schedule. We're pile poil in French, minute and minute. And it is my pleasure to introduce Olga Berogovaya, my longtime friend, and I'm your big fan, Olga, and the research panel. Olga, we've seen you last time in the vendor panel, and today you return in the moderator capacity. We have the best minds in quality estimation in the world. It's the first time where phrase or mem source, as we remember, representative meets Unbabel, meets ChatGPT, represented by Gemba. I'm very, very excited to hear what the panelists have to say about this, and particularly who is better to moderate this discussion than you, Olga.
Thank you very much, Professor. Thank you very much. And since I apologize, I somehow joined a little bit late. If I did, I don't know if you guys have been through the introductions yet. If not, let's go through the round of introductions. So, Alon, you want to go first?
Yes, of course, my pleasure. So hopefully you guys can see me on the screen. Yeah, I think so. I've been here in the background listening for earlier parts. So my name is Owen Levy. My current role, full-time day job, is I'm the VP of Language Technologies at Unbabel. I've been there for almost exactly 4 years. I have a long career in the industry and on the research side. I was a professor for full-time professor for 20 years at the Language Technologies Institute at Carnegie Mellon, working on translation technology, machine translation, and particularly evaluation. I think I'm most known for my work throughout my career on technology for translation and machine translation evaluation. I also had a startup in the space of machine translation in the early days of statistical MT that ended up being acquired by Amazon, after which I was for almost 4 years a senior manager leading one of the machine translation groups inside Amazon. So I'm very, very happy to be here and on this panel talking about the exciting things that are happening in general in the space and what we're doing at Unbabel.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Alon. Christian?
Yes, hi. I'm Christian Federmann. I work for Microsoft Translator for a decade now. I'm also one of the co-organizers of something called WMT, the workshop or now conference on machine translation, back from the statistical days to now fully neural. And I've always been pushing for human eval as opposed to just quote unquote just bleu, or the better metric at the time, which was Meteor, something Alain came up and shared with us back in the day. And recently we have been working a lot on figuring out how would we decide that the model is ship-worthy, and how do we compare and measure that and make good ship decisions within Microsoft Translator. We had a paper 2 years back, to ship or not to ship. We eventually figured out different ways of running and scaling direct assessment methodologies to large scale campaigns. So what we run as a community for WMT once a year, Microsoft runs in terms of human assessment, I don't know, every week or so. So this is a big space where you can collect lots of human labeled data. And now, of course, ever since end of last year, we are looking at this through the lens of GPT or large language models. And we published on this end of February on Archive a paper, a metric called Gemba. Yes, and I'm very happy to to join this panel and talk to you about this and help with any questions. Thanks.
Wonderful. Thanks so much. And Steven?
Yeah, hello, everybody. My name is Steven. I'm the CTO at Phrase. I've been with the company now 2.5 years. As the CTO, I'm running our engineering teams, which also includes our beautiful AI research team. I think I'm a bit of an outlier here since I don't have a research background myself, but so been a software engineer for 20 years in the past, but I've been grinding my teeth for the past 10 years on natural language problems in one way or another. I think that was something that I don't know, from one job to another, there was always problems that required some form of natural language understanding. And of course, at Phrase, we're also very much investing to the field of machine translation. So that's where I've been looking at in the past. And yeah, we had some exciting also publications around MTQE here in Phrase and also integrate into our product. So happy to discuss with all of you.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, guys. And off to the discussion. So question one, Alon, as you rightfully mentioned the other day, we did not just wake up one day to the world of large language models. Large language models have been around for quite some time and, you know, and utilized probably by all the companies represented here in some capacity for quite some time. So the first question to you guys would be, what, following the evolution of LLMs, how have you been working with them throughout ever since the models became available in your organization's history or in your personal research history? And maybe a couple of words about how do you view the evolution? Alon, you want to go first?
Yeah, I'll go first. So indeed, you know, Olga quoted me, I think accurately when I said, you know, it's important for us to put this in context, right? These LLMs didn't just like come out of nowhere. Also, the general public, it might seem that way, right? Because, you know, suddenly there was this big launch with ChatGPT that happened in November. It was a big bang. Suddenly, you know, certainly the general public, the spotlight was put on something that was happening in the background, and most people weren't quite aware of it. In the technology space, where, you know, we're developing these technologies, it's been an evolution. You know, people know neural machine translation came, you know, by now 6-7 years ago in a large sense, and it kind of came to dominate. The underlying technology is based on very similar types of very similar architectures that have been around since the neural MT days. The main distinction there is that these were specialized. NMT was, you know, these models were trained and specialized to do translation. And then what's been happening with LLMs is what's obvious is that they've been growing, right? You know, the scale of the models has been increasing over time. They've been becoming multilingual. A lot of the technology that we've developed at Unbabel over the last 2 years has been fundamentally built on pre-trained LLMs, but at the smaller level, that's easier and was more available already to specialize and tune for different applications. So the machine translation models are NMT models that we have been developing inside Unbabel have already been on top of pre-trained models that are in fact LLMs and are multilingual models, but they continue to be specialized specifically for translation. And we worked very much, and we'll talk more about this in the next few questions, on automating translation quality technology, what I call, you know, more commonly known as QE. It's not just QE, right? We're known very much for releasing the COMET machine translation evaluation model that's been largely adopted in the industry. We've won shared tasks at WMT on MT evaluation for it. And then our QE technology has been built on top of these LLMs, pre-trained LLMs that are specialized for this. So the main innovation, I think, coming at least for us in this context, is not just from the scale of the released GPT models, which are, you know, an order or several orders of magnitude larger models, and that has significant implications. But I actually think there's been like 2 main innovations coming from this last development. And one has to do with the entire prompting mechanism, right? The entire process. This is not just the pre-training of these models as LLMs, but the entire process of training these models to receive natural language prompts and be able to understand them and to then do, very specific things, whether it's translation, whether it's translation quality evaluation, whether it's many other language-related tasks. That is actually a dramatic innovation. And I think, I don't know about the other people in the room, but on other researchers, but to me, that's been like the biggest surprise how well that works. I mean, the process of doing that was not really that far-fetched, but how well this actually works in terms of like having models that are extremely flexible in general and can accurately do many language-related things through this mechanism is a major innovation, I think. So the other thing I think is just the ability of these models, again, just to do many different things rather than not be specialized just for a particular task. And I think that has also very dramatic implications. Okay, I'll stop here for now and we'll continue.
Thank you so much, Alan.
That's
Stephen, do you want to add to this?
Yeah, I think, Alan, you've been so conclusive right now, and it's very difficult to add on something to this. But I mean, like probably just because Olga, you also asked, putting it into context of our organization. Right. I mean, like if I look at Phrase, like our AI research team, we started around 2017. And more or less, this is when neural machine translation was taking off. And like we've been using neural machine translation since we basically started, right? Or I think like in 2018 probably was the first model we introduced. So we've basically, all the innovations and the things we worked on, our MTQE, auto-select, our own machine translation engines, that's the next MT has been using some form of LLM underneath, pre-trained ones, as Alan says. I think like for people in the industry, that is not new, right? So that's why I really love the question to start with. But yeah, everything that Alan said, the surprising thing, like it's not surprising that you have these things because the architecture is similar, but it's just by pure mass and scale, it captures these emergent behaviors. And I think like this was the surprise, right? So, you can do this. And then, as you talk about the prompting and all of that, and I find it can translate it and can do so many things that you had to invest into so heavily before, and train it on specific tasks. And it comes down now a lot of time to prompting, which probably is lacking some of its rigor still, but it is does things extremely well already, right? And I think the turnaround, and I mean, like we have a hackathon here tomorrow, right? Or is it today? I don't know. But the turnaround you can have in deploying something and just playing with it and like energizing and instilling the imagination, what is possible, that is massive. And you have that turnaround now. And I think that is to be acknowledged here.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Stephen. Christian, anything to add?
Plus one on everything said before. For our organization, I mean, I would say it was quote unquote clear that these models could do these things, but the shocking thing is how well they do it. But I mean, so initially, say the honest self-admission here. At some point, of course, internally we assess quality of these new kids on the block in terms of GPT translation, tech, and our specialized models. And for some time units, we were like, okay, we're still this time we're good, we're better. But that mindset has basically shifted, right? I mean, we've seen, okay, wow, for the top end languages, vanilla GPT can achieve surprising levels of quality. So it's only a matter of time that newer versions or larger models will grow to more language pairs, right? And that was a massive shift in how we perceive these models. So definitely there's the technical feasibility was sort of always on the mind map, but the fact that so quickly the level of quality has been reached, that was a little shocking. I mean, it's positive. It's positive disruption because now there's a lot of cool things we can try. Yes, and I also want to second Stephen's point on the missing rigor on prompting, right? I mean, it feels prompt hacking right now is a very, very compelling term, because it's like, try something, if it sticks, use it, otherwise try something else. This will benefit massively from more principled approaches of trying to formalizing the way in which you research what prompts actually work best, right? And it may be super confusing when that principled approach or research yields results in which you're told that some gibberish is actually the best prompt for your task, because then you as a human check out, because why would this be any better than my nice human written prompt? Somebody said the new programming language of the world is English. So hopefully it's intellect. I mean, it's understandable English, not gibberish. Let's see.
Wonderful. Thanks so much for your insights, guys. Now to a pressing question, at least that's on top of, I think it's on top of many people's minds right now. So what do we do? NMT or LLMs? Do we really even need to choose? Is it even binary? Yes, no. Are we looking at the end of the NMT models as we've known them? Otherwise, so I see a lot of debate about this and a lot of blog posts around this. So that would be great to hear from you guys. Where are we going with that? Alon, want to start with that?
So I think people won't be surprised. My opinion is it's not really a hard choice. Certainly not at this point. For translation specifically, like using ChatGPT or GPT model or any of these things, the performance is surprisingly good, and certainly in generic use cases and settings. So it's a very promising new baseline starting point. But it's not like completely like completely outperforming or just killing out of the water the NMT, dedicated NMT services and the NMT models, even ones that can be trained or adapted. So I think the focus for us is really to look at it from a practical perspective of adaptation to specific use cases and to specific customers. I think the major innovation, again, coming here is something that I've been preaching for a long time. And if Jaap is still in the audience, he'll remember me, like advocating for this already probably 5-7 years ago in Taos conferences. Two main things. One is dynamic adaptation. So what these models are allowing, through the mechanism of prompting and few-shot learning, it's basically allowing us to really do dynamic adaptation to use cases and customer data in a much more straightforward and easy way to go that has, for providers, immense impact, because it's an alternative to the process of dedicated models, fine-tuned and dedicated for each and every one customer, or dealing with that entire engineering nightmare of thousands of models in production, right? So it's really a big deal to be able to do dynamic adaptation. There have been other approaches to dynamic adaptation, in recent years. This is, it seems to me, like a significant step to making dynamic adaptation far more pervasive and easier, with really impressive results from the initial things that we've been experimenting inside on Babel. And then the other thing is basically supporting innovations on the quality estimation side and on the quality technology, which I won't, again, I think we have a question specifically, or we're going to talk specifically about quality estimation. So I'm not going to go into that we'll go into that in more detail in a little bit. Those are the two things. So I think, again, it's not really a choice right now. So things are so fluid. I would say it's an ecosystem. You want to actually have also fallback strategies, right? Different models have different strengths. These models sometimes fail and don't produce a result. Again, as a provider, you want to have basically fallback strategies to leverage the best technology, and that includes right now both NMT and API calls, and also other ways to leverage the GPT and LLM models that are there.
That's great. That's very encouraging. Any other opinions in the room or anything to add?
No, I think as before, Alan has said it all, and I think, like, I also see nothing from Christian. The one thing, just like I also just want to probably stress here is, like the question, the overall cost benefit trade-off that we really have to look at. And I think that is what Alan was alluding to. I mean, it's a simple question you can always ask someone, right? Just because ChatGPT 4 can do something, does it have to do it? Right? I mean, like that is the question. I mean, that's the question with any technology you encounter, just because it can do it. And I think, as has been alluded to, I think we're looking at a hybrid universe, where we have different models. We have perfectly, very well proven models that perform very well, that are super robust, and that also work in a important enterprise, context, where they provide value. And like we have these, and but we also have these new capabilities, and as everything was an evolution, I think we will see more of the NMT, the large language models. I mean, and the dynamic adaptation. Yes, that's one of the interesting ones, but also let's figure it out at the same time. But yeah, old models will not go away. And yeah, it's a hybrid universe we're looking at here.
Wonderful, thanks so much. And obviously there is also an issue of long tail languages, right? We keep on talking about top 10, but something also needs to happen for the remaining X, I don't know how many we have, but X number of languages in the world that we need to service. Great, so let's change the cadence. Rather than me calling you guys out, I'm just going to be asking for takers. That would probably be an easier way to do it. So next thing that we wanted to touch on, I mean, we already alluded multiple times to quality estimation. Before we embark on the quality estimation conversation, just a quick question to the room. What are the uses of GPT? I mean, for now, probably GPT, the GPT family, outside of possibly translation and quality estimation, have you seen in your companies? And where do you see, like, what's your vision for where we can go with that? Obviously, quality estimation is one of them, and we'll land on a longer discussion, but just maybe a brief overview of what else. Maybe a what else and a why. Anybody? Any takers?
I want to let one of the others go first on this one.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Christian, let's call you out.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you. What else? QE and normal metrics are sort of the bread and butter. So definitely we explore that. Translation hybrid models are sort of, again, logical next step and low-hanging fruit, quote unquote. But what we are really looking forward to doing with these models is more precise error annotation, right? I mean, at some point, the WMT metrics task has moved away from towards using MQM, DQF-like test sets. And it would be absolutely fascinating if the power of the large language model allows us to get more precise labeling of errors, because these MQM annotations are super expensive. And it takes a long time to get them. And if we can automate some of that by asking the large language model, that would be super compelling and an interesting new frontier for us. And you also just mentioned new languages, right? I mean, we have this quest of serving the 10,000 minus X shrinking amount of word languages. And it remains to be very interesting to see how can we leverage large language models such as GPT on that quest, right? I mean, obviously, Altman and friends have not built in 10,000 languages, at least not directly, but we will have to figure out, or we're looking for ways, how can we leverage the GPT access we have to try to grow more languages, and or decide or come to a conclusion, okay, maybe for that expansion, we actually go back old style and then keep our NMT pipeline around and augment it in meaningful ways. A quick comment on the hybrid argument we've heard before. It feels we always have had that, right? Every new, like at some point it was SMT hybridized with rule-based systems, and then SMT was stronger and eventually took over. Then we had first neural models, which were shipped in a way where they were added as an additional module in the SMT system, and then only a few years later it was pure neural, and now we see LLM GPT, and then it will be neural NMT plus LLM, and at some point, conceivably, it will be just GPT or LLM by itself, and then the next thing happens, right? Whatever that may be called. I don't know that.
Yeah, we'll actually get to the crystal ball round, a little bit later. Actually, one of the uses that we've seen at SmartLink is also APE. and using LLMs for automated post editing. Obviously, as you alluded to, Christian, they definitely have a home in augmenting what NMT can already do. So that's obviously another use. So back to the exciting topic of MTQE. What do we expect? How are we using it? How accurate do we believe the predictions are? And how are you using large language models for MTQE process? Or how are you planning on using it? And obviously, Christian, I'm not going to call you out just yet, but given the latest announcements, you will be called out at some point. So any comments, Alon?
This one I do want to jump on first because I'm super excited about what's going on there and particularly the work that we've been doing. So I want to actually follow up on what Christian was saying. We traditionally, a lot of people, when they hear QE, they think about just assigning a score to a translation or assigning a score to a translated document, particularly just in the context of MT, right? MT translated this. Can you on the fly, as opposed to like when evaluating machine translation models, like with COMET, where you have reference translations, can you on the fly assign some level of quality to the actual translation? But what I'm most excited about is actually the capabilities that are emerging that LLMs are really, I think, unlocking about doing translation error detection and error classification. And then scoring of a translation in terms of quality is basically just an artifact of doing that. So exactly what Christian was referring to, automating what we've typically only been able to do with human LQA on small amounts of content, because expert humans finding translation errors and labeling them and doing detailed error analysis is a time intensive and requires kind of specialized people to do this. So we couldn't do it at scale. But our latest, we've kind of moved from calling these QE models to QI models, quality intelligence models, for this very reason, because what they can do actually, and we have a publicly available demonstration service that you can try this out yourself. It's qi.unbabel.com. Sorry for the little bit of advertising there, but I think this audience would find it interesting. So that's exactly what they do. They actually you put in a source and a translation, and it will the AI model goes and finds the errors in the translation, will highlight them, will even assign it a severity level. And then based on that, you also get a quality score. It's actually aligned with MQM, which is the framework that Christian already alluded to, that we've been doing human annotations for quite a long time. In fact, the human annotated data, MQM data, is what allows us to actually train and develop dedicated models to do this with increasing level of accuracy. And this has, I think, dramatic implications because this is instant, on-the-fly AI quality intelligence that you can apply to every translation that's going through your translation platform. That has immense implications in terms of things that you can do. And that ties to your previous question. It's not just LLMs, not just for translation, not just for QE for assigning scores, it's for error detection. If it does that well, then the process of human post-editing changes, because then automatic post-editing is not just APE the way it was traditionally done before. It's basically once you find the errors, then correct those errors automatically, right? As much as you can. So it really changes, it has a potential of changing the entire translation process and the way humans augment that process in very meaningful ways. So let me stop here. I want to hear also from my fellow advertisers.
We got a request, Alon, for you. If you could just spend, if you have, the URL is right here in the chat. Maybe you could spend just a couple of minutes showing us the QI. If we have a couple of minutes.
Let's hear from the others.
Let's hear from everybody else. Let's hear from everybody else. And just, Alon, maybe one thing to call out that it equally applies to machine translation and human translation.
Exactly.
Right? So we equally redefining not just what we've known about MTQE to date, but also the way we're actually performing LQA and correcting human translation. And I think that's a huge differentiation, right? Because we usually when we talk about automation, traditionally we've been talking about automation for MTQE. So, Stephen,
I think just
go ahead. I just wanted to say that you guys were the first. Okay, let's try again. Go ahead.
Me? No?
You go.
Okay, sorry.
You go. You go.
No, sorry. I just wanted to, because I'm really curious to hear from Christian as well and give him a bit of spotlight there and their research. But the one thing that resonated very well with me, what Alan said, is, you know, probably this rebranding of MTQE, you know, like probably like MTQI or whatever it's gonna be, right? So probably MTQE doesn't cut it anymore, what it is. And I think if we think about it, you know, and the possibilities that LLM poses, exactly that, right? You detect the issues. Where are they? You know, why are they problematic? How can you fix them, right? And that's basically, you know, if it's going to be APE, that's the one thing, or it's just for PE, it makes it the job much easier, the post-editing job, because you can focus your attention to where you really need it. And this is going to speed it up tremendously. So I like that, you know, probably MTQE needs a newer name eventually, and giving it to Christian.
So maybe we should call it IQA, Intelligent Quality Assessment. No, making up acronyms on the spot. One of the things we did in our PE story, or in our quality estimation story, right? The Gemba metric thing worked for reference-based metric, as a reference-based metric, but also obviously as a QE metric. We were really concerned at first when we figured that this on last year's WMT results performed so well, right? And in the archive paper, we only had 7 different GPT versions tested, not including GPT-4. This week we finished our GPT-4 computations, and that is even stronger, right? Is it so strong that you should always invest the huge amount of effort and energy and money in using GPT-4 for the task? Maybe not, because DaVinci was already good enough for my personal liking. But it is sure very impressive to see that suddenly the GPT-4 numbers basically win on every possible sub-metric prompt type we tested. So that was super interesting. And the logical next step is trying to fix things, trying to be more precise in where your errors are. One of our biggest problems internally is we are now in this day and age where on a general domain, or even for specific domains, English, Spanish is good enough. English, Chinese is good enough. English, German, English, French mostly is good enough, right? So we have these systems we built, and then humans tell us, yeah, this is like 99 point what and 99 point something more, and it becomes super random of what do you ship or not. And this is why the next frontier is all these attempts at automating intelligent quality assessment, right? Where you want to have a subspan marked for here's something going wrong and this is not good and needs to be fixed. And the moment these models can detect it, it seems they're also really good at potentially fixing it. I mean, that's then the next low-hanging fruit. A nice side effect of these API dependent large models is that you can combine things via prompting, right? In the old days, you would have had to build and spin up a model, run something, collect output, hybridize it in some way with a different model, have a chain, and lots of like complexity. And now you can just for an hour or so try to tell the prompt to just do it for you and see if it works out well enough. And if it does, well, we have an integrated workflow, which is super compelling. There's also a lot of, I mean, we need to be super, super cautious of how much we want to put our belief in these models, because at some point the whole thing becomes circular. The more GPT-based translation systems we see, and the more GPT-based evaluation we use, the more it becomes sort of the same thing used over and over. But this is sure super fascinating right now.
Excellent, thank you. And Stephen, what I was, sorry, I was speaking over you. What I was trying to say is I've been watching specifically mem source and phrase experiments with MTQE, because to the best of my knowledge, you guys were one of the first ones to push MTQE module into the CAT tool. So that was my preamble to you speaking. Okay, guys. So we mentioned a couple of times that direct annotations are crazy expensive, right? Yet MQM is allowing us to basically calibrate the models and calibrate the quality. And I'm watching the discussion in the chat, and there is this pressing question. Okay, where does the human fit in the loop? What is the human in the loop status quo, and where can a human help the adoption of large language models? Where does a human fit in the process? And my personal big question is, what can human in the loop contribute to the research? Like we've called out the MQM. So I don't know, any takers on this one?
Just, I mean, it pulls back to what Ellen was describing, if we have these intelligent systems, that verify the quality, we can point the human in the loop towards and really point their attention towards where we see a problem. I think the human becomes probably more important here because they will annotate correctly and we will point them to areas that we don't understand, right? So this is where LLM breaks down and sees like, okay, I've looked at this, doesn't work anymore. So this is the context, this is the error, this is what I'm thinking, this is what the LLM is thinking, and now the human in the loop, please tell us and give us the correct answer. So I think that in the end is a very valuable asset, but of course, how the human interacts will probably change. The interfaces will probably need to change. And we need to build interfaces and UI, and experiences that cater to this kind of evaluation. And I think that's the interesting part. But just closing off, as a developer, what's the value of a developer now, right? To think and write code. Right. I think the more specialized you are and the better understanding you have in reasoning, it becomes even more valuable, right? If you can just copy paste something, it's probably not so good. But you need to be able to reason to something, especially through the corner cases. So that's why I think from a developer perspective, it's the same, right? So you still need a very specialized knowledge, and that is still important. And I stop babbling.
Okay, now. Great. Christian, Alon, Christian here. Go ahead.
Just briefly, so we've always had these questions. Oh yeah, MT is basically making all our translators jobless. And no, this is always about trying to sort of complementary support each ecosystem. From that, or in that vein, our Microsoft internal notion is that of a co-pilot, right? I mean, and that is one of the marketing terms I like, because it sort of is an AI co-pilot is a concept which sort of makes sense to me, because it tells me that I might still be the human captain of that flight. And so I have my say and can steer it if I see a danger approaching. But it also is something we all experience for I don't know, decades now, right? You board a plane, and oftentimes most of that flight is actually going on autopilot, and a surprisingly small amount of planes crashes. It's still bad when one crashes, because that's the ultimate catastrophe. But this can also be brought over to these new AI technologies. So we will see how these will be adopted in more and more co-pilot scenarios. I mean, I don't know how many Microsoft co-pilots will be there in a year, but I expect it will be many. And that is the same goes for human in the loop, right? Just we need human in the loop to verify that these AI things do the right thing. The exact exposure of those humans in the loop to the tech will be different UX, UI, different tasks. I mean, 2 years back, nobody asked about alignment. And now the main thing is, what was the task intent? And now does the answer align with that? And we need to get feedback on that. We will also have to figure out, how can we make this feedback loop as rapid as we can make it, so that the machines can learn faster? So again, right now, full on hybrid and everybody collaborates mode in my mental mind. And anybody assuming the machines rise and take over is a little bit on the crazy side.
Okay, that's great to hear too.
Yeah.
That gives hope. Alon.
I did have two maybe observations or comments to add to my wise colleagues here that I think I agree with completely. So one is kind of like an observation, really. The traditional MTPE process, right, where basically machine translation was doing a pre-translation, and then the human expert basically was responsible for reading everything, finding the errors, and doing the test. That is really, in this new world, going out of the window. Because imagine basically a world now where the machine translation is so good that it has one error in 1,000 words. So it makes no sense for a human to actually like search for that 1 in 1,000 word error, right, without any help on identifying where that error is. So this is why I believe that error detection, automated AI accurate error detection is going to be critical, because now the work of the editor is really about focusing the attention to where that attention is really necessary and where they can actually add value and actually do what we were expecting them to do, right? So that I think is a critical observation. The transformation of the role of the human editor to be driven by automated error detection, I think is really, really important. And so that's one observation. The other one, I think, escaped my mind. So if it comes back, I'll get back.
Okay. But Alon, would it be fair to say that managed by exception is more of the future?
Yeah.
Like really...
Oh, I remember. I saw a question. There was a question in passing that relates to what we're talking about. So if these AI models are capable of detecting translation errors that the model was actually generating, why can't they avoid making those mistakes to begin with? Which is a really obvious and interesting question. And I without going to really technical details, I think we are in a window of time where these things are still kind of separate. That these, it's the way these models operate. They're, when they're doing translation, they're more, apt to generating some mistakes because they're focused on the way they operate on just doing translation. And when you focus them to actually look and see if they made if a model made a mistake, and you have the right prompting data and you have the right basically focused tasks, they are capable of finding mistakes even where that same underlying model, it could be GPT-4 that you ask it to translate, it made a translation mistake. Then you ask it specifically to check and see if there's a translation error, and it will find it in many cases. So yes, it seems counterintuitive, but I think this may not last. I don't expect this will last, forever. I don't know how long this world will exist, but we're in a world where, yes, AI does still make mistakes, and yes, AI can find those mistakes, and even in many cases propose how to correct them. So I know it's counterintuitive.
Quick comment on that. So essentially, when you translate, you have a source, and the model sort of does its thing and then generates something. That is a big generation task, which is sort of a little open-ended from the model perspective, right? Whereas when you ask it to find errors in this translation, you give it already a constrained subset of options maybe to play with, and that may explain why for that constrained subset, the model is able to figure out, oh, here's something which I think in hindsight I shouldn't have done. An interesting thing is for practitioners right now, that means you can actually use that, and then you can build your own little self-learning thing where you run it back to your prompt for assessing, and then you try to ask it to even fix it for you. And then you have 3 to 5 interactions with GPT. Satya will be super happy, and you might have a better result. So great.
Okay. Thank you so much. Thanks so much again. And maybe we don't have Konstantin. I don't know how we're doing on time and whether you will allow us a couple extra minutes.
So I wanted to ask the participants, ladies and gentlemen, you have a unique opportunity to ask a question to some of the best minds in applied artificial intelligence and localization. That's a unique chance. The amount of expertise in the room is unprecedented. So use your chance. 3 minutes to answer your most complex, most scientific question. You can get the answer right here and now. And Olga, with this I pass back to you.
Okay, great. So actually we had a couple of comments, and apologies if I cannot capture all the questions, as there are many, and thanks a lot for your participation. We had one comment that I was really interested in, but we can spend another hour talking about what happens to translation memories, what happens to segmentation. Like now you want to translate an entire document, yet in the TMs, in the TMX standard, we're used to one-to-one, right? Source target. And now you go document level, or even more so, you can generate target copy without any source. So maybe just quick question, and maybe one of you could answer this. TMs and CAT tools, where are we going? Stephen, I think that one should go to you.
I think I'm interested. I think we talked about CAT, and I think probably some of the UI needs to adapt over time, but it will not go away immediately. I think the value of TM is basically as data. right? So I think that is
100%.
everything that we had. I think the translation memory is data. That is data you can feed back, and that is the data you can feed back also in these LLM adaptive workflows, as we said. So I think that will not go away, because the translation memories give you very good quality data that you can work on, and within, you know, a TMS, as it still is called, that is still the remaining power. So I think probably just, you know, as a replacement mechanism, fuzzy matches, maybe that will disappear over time, but the data value of a TM, that remains. And I think that's not to be understated.
Thank you so much, Ian. I think it's very fair. We all need data. We need training data. And what's the better way of accumulating data than actually accumulating it through human input? Okay, guys, two questions. One question, constraints. We've been speaking about the galore and, you know, the parade of how many things LLMs can do. You touched on some of the constraints. What else? What else is there? Is there anything that still would preclude us from fully rely on LLMs in our large language models in our localization process? What are the immediate constraints that come to mind? I mean, everybody talks about model hallucination, and I have to admit that even GPT-4 still gives me odd answers in Russian. But what else? Anything else, Alon or Christian or Steven? Anybody wants to comment on this? Immediate constraint.
I think I just throw in something very boring, which is not technical, and then I'll let the others go. I mean, you know, regulation, privacy, and all of these things are still a constraint, right? So we can talk about all the tech in the world, but this is still real. And I mean, so there is some threats to OpenAI's model currently, you know, and how they are operating. So if we build everything on it, so there are some regulatory constraints that might call into action. So it's not the brave new world and you can do whatever you want. And I say this neutrally. I think it's just, this is not only about tech, but now I pass to the others who probably have a technical answer.
Great. Anybody else? I mean,
I have a non-technical answer, which is cost. I mean, you can adopt this. Everybody, I mean, we get slammed by requests for GPT-4, and that is so expensive that oftentimes, I don't know, why don't you use like one of the lower ones, right? DaVinci 3 is perfectly capable for most of these things. Anything below, don't even try, because that is sort of not good enough. But if you can get 10x the amount of translation for same price, well, that means something, right? And a second thing is similar to the adoption and the migration from SMT to NMT back in the day. I think we need another year or two under our belts, understanding how these models behave, so that we get a gut feeling what it means and if we can trust this, right? I mean, everybody understands or has a gut feeling for blur score differences. And now we spend two and a half years understanding comet score differences, and suddenly we feel good when we see our comet differences and have a mental map of how that what it means. And we will simply need more time to understand behavior, right? Which is also not technical, it's just like human perception and how do we experience that tech.
Thank you. We also had a comment from the audience that there could be a stability issue. We're not quite sure 100% yet about the stable performance.
Exactly. I think it's reliability along several dimensions, you know, stability, you know, critical errors, you know, cost, you know, there's some things that, and also these things are rapidly changing, you know, the developers of these LLMs are addressing these things. Some of things will disappear. Some of these limitations will disappear quickly. Some of them will be more persistent. So I think it's really limitations around, you know, risk and reliability and cost in the large scale of things.
Just one add-on, because I didn't hear it, and I think it doesn't get mentioned enough, is also the whole security aspect. I think there is all, you know, how safe are these things to use, all these injection attacks that are going on. And I think, like, when we talk about copilots, if you expose it like this, I mean, there is a serious security implication that comes with that. And I like to read exploits on LLMs on archive, you know, and see what's going on there. So I think that is definitely something we need to figure out. And, you know, like, let's also be cautious what we expose our customers to, right? So that's also what I tend to think about when looking at this. So that's also our responsibility as technical people here. You know,
I totally agree. I don't know. Have you guys seen the grandma jailbreak kind of exploits? If not, I encourage you guys to look it up online. We shouldn't spend time on it here, but okay. It's hilarious. It's hilarious. It's asking the model to actually pretend that you're my grandma who used to talk to me when I was young, and basically getting the model to tell you about things that it shouldn't talk about because grandma used to do it.
Yeah. Okay, and we see a lot of agreement from the audience. So Konstantin, I believe we are on time. If you don't mind,
5 minutes over time.
Okay, fantastic. Can we just take one last second for the crystal ball? If there's anything else in terms of what the future holds you guys want to add, and we literally are talking 1 minute, Konstantin.
Yeah, I mean, you know, if it was difficult to do crystal ball, you know, like as we were moving from SMT to NMT, or even like a year ago, it's even, you know, more difficult now. Things are just moving so fast. I think we're going to be astonished, and this is, I think I said this before in a different occasion. I think like in 10 or 20 years, we're going to look back and say, this was basically the revolution of our times. This AI revolution that we're going through in 2022, 2023 is like the equivalent of the Industrial Revolution, you know, from 150 years ago. We're going to find ourselves in a completely different world, and nobody knows exactly what that's going to look like, but it's going to be very different. That's all I can really say.
Thank you so much, Alan. And I think Konstantin, I mean, there are two options from here. We take another hour, we adjourn. So I think we probably would have to.
At the end of the event, there is a networking session for the late nighters who have the time. If you'd like, please join the networking session. There'll be Zoom breakout rooms, and we'll carry on for a little while so that people can meet you in person and you know, talk in an informal scenario. So for those that have the availability in European evening or midday for the United States, stay tuned. There is a networking session. With this, Olga, may I conclude this panel?
Absolutely so, and thank you so much to our amazing panelists. Thanks a lot.
Thanks to Olga.
Thanks a lot, guys.
Thank you.
See ya.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, keep it coming with reactions. They're all appreciated, and they make this event more dynamic. And with this, I would like to push on. We're a little bit behind the schedule, to the next session, which is really interesting, the innovation showcase. We will see now in startup competition kind of scenario, the integrations of ChatGPT and large language models into existing CAT tools and translation management systems. I would love to introduce the moderator, Madhu. Madhu, are you here with us? Hello.
Hello, from India.
It must be already late where you are.
Yes, but it's never too late to learn something new.
An excellent repost. All right, Madhu, I leave it in your hands. Now, everyone prepare to be amazed, dazzled, enlightened, and also prepare your quizzical mind for to poke holes in the existing integrations. This is early days. These are early days, and we can see now how the technology companies have reacted to this wave of GPT. Madhu, I leave it in your hands.
All right, thank you, Konstantin. So we've heard the news, we've heard the research, we've also seen some people adopt, right? Now it's about the demos. And like Konstantin said, it's going to be like a startup model, typical startup model, very specific, very precise, eye-popping, and awesome. We'll go in a round. Each of the presenters will have about 5 minutes. I'll be timing it, and I will let you know when you have about 30 seconds left. Nick, let's start with you. I was going through your LinkedIn profile, and I found something really interesting. You follow Arnold Schwarzenegger, right? So now I know where your love for machines come from. So over to you, and your 5 minutes start now.
You're right. Skynet is close, right? Anyway, so I'm excited to be here. Hello to everyone. I'm co-founder of Localized, a translation management software. And basically what I wanted to show you today is the first iteration of Localized AI or localization assistant. And we've initially focused on translation process, which was the most obvious choice. But I just wanted to say that there is much more to come, because we see that AI could make more productive life and work, not only just of translators, but basically everyone involved in the process: designers, managers, engineers. And we believe that we will be able to move the needle here. Also, so the approach we took was a little different from what I saw. So we don't really want translators to be prompt engineers. So we basically did that work for them already, and focused on the ease of use and people getting things done. So let me share my screen and show you some of the things which I've prepared for you. All right. Hope you can see my screen. Basically, first and most important, we thought, so what makes it different? What makes AI different from machine translation engines, and what humans do better than machine translation engines do? And probably you know that Localized has been historically focused on software localization, and in software localization, context is obviously essentially important, right? If there are thousands of short strings which appear on buttons and menu items, then it's often hard to understand what that is about. So what we did is contextualized kind of translator thingy, right? And so translators can actually provide, not translators, but anyone who speaks the native language and understands what the source copy is about can provide a short description. So let's say here, let's say word park, English word park, which can have multiple meanings depending if it's a noun or verb. So let's say park as a noun, you're approaching a park right here in Spanish. So Google DeepL, I think it's park, and this is correct. And also Localized AI thinks this is park. But then let's get to a more complex example. Let's say a button in the parking app which says park, which is actually a verb, to park. Then a short description of begin parking procedure would produce a totally different result, right? So it's aparcar in Spanish. And still, machine translation agents, TMT engines, you cannot pass this context. So this was kind of the first step. And this looks very promising, right? Obviously, these are simple examples, but I just wanted to grasp the concept here more easily. Also, one interesting use case we found is that actually it can translate from UK English to American English, or any combination really. So I've asked AI to come up with a really British sentence, which is like interpret gardeners subsequently garnered admiration from passers-by witnessing picturesque scenery. So let's try to descramble this. And it does pretty good job. I don't know, and Google Translate and DeepL just cannot do this because English is the same language for them. And as you can see, people who enjoy seeing the lovely landscape. But then what's one more thing which we recently released in the Localized AI beta program is actually support for glossaries, right? So here I defined the word to flap. I don't know what that actually means, but whatever, like, sorry for this example. To flap, to be translated as flop to Spanish always. And it does a pretty decent job doing that. So it can even conjugate non-existent words. So imagine what it does with words that actually exist in the language. And well, as I said, we've been thinking a little bit broader rather than just translation. So we thought, what else can we do for people? And the first obvious choices for software localization was actually shortening of strings, right? Because sometimes it doesn't fit the button or the menu. So just let me switch the base language to Spanish, so you can actually see how it works the other way around, right? So I actually copied website heading from Miro.com just for demo purposes. Oops. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, so now it's translating to English, and now, as I said, it's a website heading. It assumed that it should be capitalized, right? Which kind of makes total sense. But then what if I want different variants? So so it can provide, let's say, 3 different variations, which kind of totally makes sense. Join forces from anywhere. I can pick this one. Then let's go to a little bit more complex example. This is actually again, the subheading from the Miro.com website, which is there in Spanish. That's probably humans translated that. Yeah, so it does the translation quite well. I think it's even a little better than DeepL. And then what's interesting, it can quite well rephrase those things, which is, like sometimes it requires humans' brain power to like use different words. So we found this feature was really kind of something that people were very excited about from the feedback we got over the months as it was in the beta stage, and we have more than 100 customers testing it out right now, and we are about to open for towards 300 people more. Yeah, and then let's try to shorten that. Yeah, so does pretty good job. So basically, it's a little bit of a transcreation here. Also, a new button which we added is actually which made sense in the TMS. So like Localize is actually make SEO friendly. Well, I don't really know how it does that, but I assume that it uses verbs in the beginning. Basically, it has a knowledge of how SEO-friendly variants should sound. So yeah, that's pretty good job. So actually, we are about to run our own website through that thingy, and like to just get SEO ranking higher.
Your time is up, Nick.
Yeah, so that was it from me actually, and thank you for listening. Hope you liked it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Really, really helpful. Let's move on to the next demo. Stacy, welcome. Stacy will be presenting, and I've heard about Stacy and that she's into threat intelligence. So let's see how important this session is going to be with us. And Stacy will be supported with Dimitri. He will be helping her with the engineering part. Over to you, Stacy.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for the introduction. Hi, everyone. I'm Stacy from CustomMT. What I think that you've been on this hackathon for a day almost, and there is one burning question that you all want to know. What do I do with this knowledge? How do I harness this power that I have right now? So what I'm going to tell you, you have the power. Now I'm going to teach you how to tame it. So today, me and Dimitri, if you can start sharing the screen, we're going to teach you how you can harness this magic of GPT, what you can do with it. So there are different types of integrations, but we're going to be showing you today what we think most of you are going to be using. We're going to be showing you how to use them in a CAT tool. For that, we're using CustomMT console, which has a bunch of different engines. So you can see there's an entire list. You can connect all of them. We also have custom engines if you need them. But what we're going to be showing you today is the GPT 3.5 turbo engine that is already integrated and is very easy to set up. So let's go and let's start with templates, and let's create a very basic GPT outcome, what we're going to call pure GPT. So no prompt engineering yet, forget everything that you've learned up to this point. Let's just see what the engine is going to give you. So we're going to choose English to French for this particular exercise. We're also going to choose the engine. And for this, we're very proud to show you there is a special field for you, which we're going to come back to later. Don't worry, I'm not going to forget, but it's called prompt engineering. And that's where the magic is going to happen. That's where you will be able to change GPT outcome in the real time. But for now, let's see what the regular engine gives us. So we created the template, no glossary, no prompt so far. And we have this little text. We have about 4 segments. And this is a connection to Trados. Because again, we presume that you're going to be using them a lot in CAT tools. So that's what we're showing you. Let's choose a template. So GPT Pure, nothing has changed. Let's see what the engine is going to give us. And you can see all the translation is happening in the real time, right in front of your eyes. Also, because it's real time and because it's a Zoom demonstration, it can take a tiny little bit longer than usual. So don't worry, you're going to have faster results. But yeah, as you can see, very easy. Created the template, connected the engine. Here you go. Here's your GPT translation. But now let's say you're not happy with it, because we all know you have very particular domains, you have very particular cases. So the first thing that we're going to demonstrate to you is that you can add a glossary to it. So can you please show the glossary? For those of you who don't speak French, and I presume the majority of you don't, the English word job can be translated in many different ways to French, but I chose this one, which is un boulot, which is a very slang term. So no engine right off the bat is going to give it to you. That's why we use this as an example. So I created this very little glossary, and I'm going to show you how to use a glossary and how to change the output immediately. So for this, we're going to go back to our console and we're going to create another template, or we're going to edit the existing one. We get to the magic field, which is called prompt engineering. And you can see you can upload your glossary to it. So that's exactly what we did. Same thing, same language pair. We uploaded our glossary. So now let's see if that can influence the translation that we're getting. So again, going back to the CAT tool, changing the template. Now we're choosing the one with the glossary. And hopefully the engine is going to learn that for now, every single time when it sees the word job, it has to translate it in a slightly more informal and slangish way, which is going to be boulot in French. So let's see if that works. And voila, you're taming the magic. Now the force is under your control. You can see that in most of the translations, the word actually changed to the word that we wanted it to use. So very easy, very simple, and you're in complete control. Isn't that cool? But now I see another problem. So we are very careful, especially in CustomMT, with gender inclusive language. And we see that in the very last sentence, and we're going to show it to you at the end. In English, we have the candidate. So the candidate in French, for some reason, becomes masculine. We don't know why, but it says le candidat. We don't like this. We want it to be more inclusive. So what we do, we go back and we introduce all the knowledge that you've been gathering throughout the day on prompt engineering. Let's go to the template and let's do the prompt engineering. The very same thing, but right now in this field, first of all, we're going to teach our GPT model that it's a friendly and professional translator that specializes in business-related translations, because that's kind of the context that we're translating. We are also going to make sure that in the instruction field, we're going to include this. Please be gender neutral. Please do use feminine whenever possible to make it more inclusive. So that's what we told our model. We're also using the same glossary file. And then let's see if this can change anything. Because, you know, you've been talking about prompt engineering all day. So let's see whether it actually works and how it works. And again, very easy. Just choose a template. Right now, the engine knows what it's doing. And let's see if it changed anything. So again,
30 seconds,
real
guys.
time. Perfect. Almost done. Yeah, let's see. Real time, very easy. We fit it into this 5-minute demo. And you can see the outcome is changing. And okay, yeah, Zoom is being a little bit slow. Perfect. Now you can see in the very last sentence, and we have la candidate. So change to the feminine, which is acceptable in French. In many cases, are going to be considered more gender neutral. Can we show the final results? We have a file for you because we know it's difficult to see. So you have source file, which you can see we don't like it. Then with pure GPT, the outcome is not exactly what we wanted it to be. So we did a glossary, and that worked, which is super cool, super easy. And then we can also do glossary and prompts together. And in a setup which takes you, I don't know, a couple of seconds, you can influence GPT in real time, which is exactly what we wanted to show you. It's possible, it's doable. You can train to be a magician in no time. And we did it through our CustomMT console, which is, you know, the place for you to learn your magic. Thank you, everybody. Thank you so much. And that's what we wanted to show you today.
Thank you, Stacey and Dimitri. That was fantastic. Magical, as somebody says in the chat. Thank you so much. Now over to Gabriel. Gabriel, from using the word processor to blending translations. Over to you. The platform is all yours.
Okay. Hello, everybody. Pleasure being here. And thank you for all of the things I've seen. Really cool stuff. Let me go over and share my screen. 1 second. Okay. Can everybody see my screen? Perfect. Bring up here the correct window. What's going on here? Just a sec. All right, perfect. So here we have our translation editor in BureauWorks. Glossary terms are highlighted in yellow, and they're shown over here below. Translation memory feeds are here on the right. So for this segment here, for instance, we have a 101% match and a 93% match. Now, the way we're thinking about this is really trying to blend it into the translator experience. And one of the things we notice is that it's really a pain when you have discrepancies, for instance, in glossary terminology between translation memory, potentially a machine translation feed, and so on. So let me see if I can find here a good example. So in this sentence here, for instance, we don't have any feed available, but I can, let's say, for instance, I did have an MT feed that says, I'm using Brazilian Portuguese, which is basically the only language I can kind of explain something in. So we have the glossary term starts, that's as inicie, but the translation has a different term. And let's ask AI to translate this. And now let's apply this translation. And what's happening here now, you can see that start is being tokenized as inicie, the glossary was applied. And what we're doing is we're merging feeds from different machine translation engines with translation memory and the glossary with different weights to make good decisions as far as what makes sense for a translation. So here's a good example too. Machine translation didn't understand that BureauWorks is an actual noun. First thing also that's pretty cool is that we're identifying the part of speech via AI as well, which is something that can be pretty useful. Let's save this. Now let's ask AI to translate this. And now the terminology was seamlessly applied and it's learning as I go. So next time we face something like that, it's going to know what to do. Here's another example. In this case, we do have a 101% translation memory match happening here. And let's say, for instance, we want to change the idea of own. In this case, it's basically using two words for it. Let's just use a random concept. Again, it's identifying it as an adjective in this context. And let's call this something different. And one thing that's important to keep in mind, I was writing about this earlier this morning, is that with AI, because everything is probabilistic, at least with these engines, in this case, for instance, it accepted my suggestion, but if I suggest, for instance, terminology that's clumsy or weird, AI may decide to override in some cases. When the probability is very high that whatever I'm doing is wrong, it may decide to override my glossary. So those are a few examples. Let me see if I can, here's another one. So the machine translation, what's coming from the translation memory says, você escolhe, which is literally you choose, but the glossary says that choose should be decide. Let's ask AI to translate that. And it meshed the translation memory with the glossary. And now again, if I click back in, it's tokenized and recognizing the terminology. But we're doing a lot more than that. So for instance, we can also ask AI to review. This is a decontextualized review. So it's basically trying to look at the text from a separate set of eyes, and it's suggesting to go back to the translation memory because it's more literal, commonly used in Brazilian Portuguese, again, providing its explanation. I may agree or disagree. In this case, I disagree with it flat out. I prefer my way, confirm the segment and move on. So it's essentially this more dialogical way of relating to glossaries, translation memories, and machine translation. There are other things as well. I think I did show the auto identifier part of speech. And we're working on several other things that I can show you that are in the very beginning stages. But in this case, for instance, this is, I think now we're in the review cycle. Let me see here, I believe so. So let's start making changes.
30 seconds.
Okay, so I'm not going to go into the review cycle with only 30 seconds left to go. I'll go back here. But essentially, we are working on lots of other things as well. And we've already noticed basically decrease in most cases, over 50% less edit distance when working this way than when working with just a traditional by feed of translation memory and MT, even with trained engines. So it gets better and better as a translator trains it to understand it in its own way. So thank you very much. And again, happy to be here and look forward to any questions. And I'll share my Substack that has a full article on this, and hopefully everybody can read it. So thank you.
Thank you, Gabriel. Very clean and clear. And now over to Igor, the product guy. Igor, the floor is all yours.
Again, thank you so much. Thank you for having me today. So cool demos today. Let me share my screen and show what we've got here. So today I will be demonstrating a couple of things, how to use OpenAI GPT on Smartcat in our platform in two different modes. First, like fully automatic translation, and then supervised text processing. And what I'm talking here is this. Smartcat is really configurable in terms of that you are able to create multiple profiles or presets of MT engines. And using OpenAI GPT with different prompts can give you a multitude of different customized translation engines for your needs. The direction that we took here with this, we currently have this as a beta, is to give our users an ability to fully customize and be prompt engineers, in fact, because there are so many use cases that we cannot come up with by ourselves, and our clients with different needs want to play around with those things. So two things that I will be demonstrating is ability to create those custom presets, and also how to use the same the same presets, same actions in the editor. So this is how it looks in our UI, where you can create multiple engine presets, and the basic, the bare bones functionality looks like this. So you're using GPT-4, or you can use GPT 3.5, which in certain cases produces decent results, but it's much faster. And here you can craft your prompts to do the translation or do something else. And below, you can immediately try this out. So you can select, for example, English, and I'll be using Russian as my native language, and you will be do some testing. And run this and then immediately get the result. And then you can, of course, switch to different languages and then try the output here. Once you are done with crafting the this profile, this preset, you can use this as a regular machine translation engine. So next, let's see how we can apply this in a practical sense. This translation, I did some translation of some content from the kids book where it has direct speech. And when I'm using a regular machine translation engine such as Yandex, for example, here there are multiple segments that have direct speech, but they are again consistent in terms of grammatical gender. So here a couple of things are translated as if it was a girl who is talking. And this specific segment is giving you a male perspective of the direct speech. So how can you change that? So what I did here is I created a special preset which says GPT male direct speech. And what it does essentially, it not only instructs you to translate from this particular source language into target, but also translate direct speech from a male's perspective. So now you can do the same testing and see how that goes. For example, if I go select Russian as well and provide some direct speech, I was walking down the road and I can run this. You can see that it translates it from a male's perspective. And now I can quickly switch that to female, for example, and then rerun the prompt, and it will do this from female's perspective. So now, within a few seconds, I tweaked my machine translation engine so that it can produce proper results. And now I can rerun translation in the editor and basically change the translations. Now, this can be done fully automatically as a part of automatic translation workflow step in Smartcat, but you can also do some interactive things. And if I go back here, I won't be doing any saves. You can see that I also created some actions. Translation action, shorten action, they look like this. Again, the same UI where you can create your prompts freely. You can play around with them, but I also enabled this in an editor action and gave it a name. And if I go back into my UI here, I can show you how this looks. So you have this AI actions toolbar, where all of the actions are exposed as buttons. And now I can directly go into a segment, for example, here, which uses female perspective for the translation of the direct speech. and I can say direct speech as male, and it will convert the segment to the next, to the new value. And you'll always get information about revisions here. You can see exactly what was changed. So again, I can provide my actions, I can do translation, I can shorten the text if I want to, I can do rephrasing, pretty much everything is possible. The idea was to give that to our customers as early as possible, let them come up with some ideas of the actions, adjust them to their needs. And then the next phase would be to give this to the public and give people, quality presets that they can use right from the start. So this is just the start. We're just scratching the surface with that.
30 seconds,
where we're
Igor.
going. Okay, thank you. Yeah, we will be providing more context in those templates so you can craft your prompts with including information about comments that are provided in the segment or glossary terms or previous translations. We will be also providing a more interactive way of guiding people through different segments where we believe they can apply certain improvements to the translations. So yeah, this is super exciting, and I want to close my speech with the fact that you can try Smartcat today. It's free for everybody, and you give 10,000 words per month for free, which you can use for GPT-based translations as well. So you can use this as a playground. So if you follow that URL, you can sign up for the beta, and we'll be happy to enable this on your account.
Thank you, Igor. Igor, if you could paste that link on the chat, that the users could make use of it. And last but not the least, I think the hero of the translators, Terence, over to you.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
Okay, good afternoon. I'm going to quickly run through this app as we only have 5 minutes, and it's a bit like speed dating, really. What I'll do is, I can't see myself. I seem to have disappeared. Never mind, I'll carry on without. So what I'll do is take you through the various buttons on this little app, which is basically a gateway to ChatGPT, doing some useful tasks which a translator might want to carry out. So the first button is for the model, so we can choose which model.
Hold on, Terence, we don't see your screen yet.
Screen.
Please share the screen.
So, can you see my screen?
No.
No.
Please press share screen in the middle.
Share screen, there's a green.
No, I press.
And the
and
audience,
then select
please,
screen.
show
No,
some
I
support,
press
because
share
Terence is
screen.
not a large company. He did everything on his own, and he represents the translators and developers individuals today. So I'm very excited to welcome Terence here.
Can you see my screen?
Not yet. Alt-S.
No, I press it. Can you see it now?
No, there's the second window where you press share.
I press share, yes, share screen.
And then the second interface comes up.
Alt-S, let's try that. Because we tried it out earlier during the test, and oh dear.
Happens during the demo. Every time there is a present scenario, something goes wrong. It's normal.
No, I'm pressing share screen.
Yes, and then in a second, share everything.
Ah, yes. Oh dear. Are you seeing it now?
No.
Oh dear, share.
There we go.
Ah, great. Okay,
Works.
I'll be very quick. Sorry about the technical hitch. So basically, we have a button for model. We can choose our model. We've got a button for temperature, and we have a button for importing a document. So we can import a PDF somewhere here, emergency PDF there. And what we can do is we can also apply examples, very much like your colleague did with providing guidance in form of a glossary or a set of sentences which will guide the ChatGPT to do a translation. Now, if we press the translate button, we haven't selected a language, so it's going to tell me, I think it's, oops, hang on. Oh, this is a disaster. Yes, so it's translated it into Spanish. It is because I think Spanish is the last language I was trying out there. Also, we can ask GPT to paraphrase it, to write it another way. It will do it. I'm in a rural area with a very slow internet connection, so we just have to be patient. Yes, so it's GPT has rephrased it, written in another way, or we could also it's done it again. I'm sorry about this. This is the rural internet connection here. If we take that out and take that out, and we write a sentence in terrible English, and we can ask the GPT to correct that, and it will give us a correction of the text. We can also ask it to summarize, and the other feature is we also have a free prompt, so we could, for instance, ask it to write a menu for paella in Indonesian, and it will go off and think about it and then write us a menu in Indonesian for paella. But it's taking its time. This is I'm sorry, this is a rural internet connection, and it is taking its time to get to GPT and come back.
Terence,
yeah, so it's written as
on your own.
It's now written as
solo developer, and
it's written as a recipe for paella in Indonesian. So the other thing is we can also save our output on local disk. So we can put recipe. Yeah, so it saved it. Okay, so I do apologize for the connection, and I do apologize for the mix-up at the beginning, but this is basically what we've written. It's a gateway to ChatGPT for a few simple tasks connected with translation. And I think I'll leave it at that because I'm struggling here with the connection.
Terence,
thank you, Terence. That was awesome.
Thank you very much. It's a great demonstration. Where can we find your product if we want to use it?
Yes, well, if you go here, you go to the website mydutchpal.com, and it's only £35, so you can buy it yourself, download it, and try it out. And it's something we are developing further. with the view to including the possibility of generating translation memories directly. But this is how far we've got so far. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you, Terence. Thank you very much to all our presenters today. There are a few questions in the Q&A. Konstantin, I know we are running out of time. May I request the presenters to look at the questions in the Q&A and answer them in the chat?
Yeah.
And back to you, Konstantin.
Yeah.
I know Anna is waiting.
Beautifully moderated.
Yeah.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, you've seen how quickly the translation technology companies sprung onto the integrations with ChatGPT. It shows how easy it is to onboard this technology, and it also shows that there is a long road ahead with lots of features coming up. Right? In just 2 months, the TMS have pivoted. They built integrations, and we are ready to give them to you. You can try anything that you like. I think the future is very bright. On this note, I would like to switch to the last presentation or discussion, a fireside chat of the day. And remember that afterwards you can stay, we'll share a link, and there'll be a networking session, free form, informal, in Zoom breakout rooms that you can meet each other on video and discuss what you've learned, make useful connections, perhaps find employers, customers, suppliers, whatever you'd like. And Anna, I'm honored to have you here. Please welcome on stage Anna Schlegel. And I know you mostly as the writer who has made our industry cool. Your book, Truly Global, has been a sensation, and I think it's a must-read for everyone who works on the buy side in localization. It's about how to communicate, how to set priorities, how to be successful in the corporate environment. This is something that is very much needed by the localization people. How are you feeling today?
Absolutely. This is so cool. And I love that Terence said, like, this is like speed dating, and you guys did really a great job, because I'm like copying the links and slacking them to my team. And I know people from my team are here. So hello, team. I just a couple of things. So this is great. It's coming down so fast, right? And congratulations to the innovators and the folks that are already developing, and he's like, it's 35 euros or pounds or whatever. This is wonderful, right? I was reading last week that there were 1,000 new apps on AI, not just ChatGPT, right? They're coming down pretty much every week or every other week, because everybody's like going nuts with all this kind of stuff. And parsing will be interesting to see what is that we keep and what is it that we can onboard. I have to tell you that from the corporate side of things, obviously we manage platforms, right? So I'm the head of a global platform that is being used by thousands and thousands of people around, nearly 190 countries. And when something this cool and disruptive comes in, as a corporation, we try to get our act together very quickly. Obviously, the legal departments get very concerned, not concerned with this. The concern is plagiarism, and the concern is ethics, and who wouldn't tell one of these AIs, go and create a company similar than, or a company similar to, right? And yesterday, I'm back on Twitter just because, I got out and then I got back on, and there was a tweet that said, if you had the prompt to the GPT was, I have $100, create a company for me, where do I start, right? This is so incredibly powerful. I think companies right now are very much at how do we create the guidelines so that this can scale. And obviously the first place that everybody's thinking is within the engineering communities, right? In R&D or P&T or whatever these teams are called. And so it's very exciting. I know there is a lot of questions on the corporate side. I'm also one of the founders of Women in Localization. So the same questions that we saw 20 years ago when we started looking at machine translation of, are we all going to be out of a job, right? And so I don't think we're going to be out of a job, but it's an evolution of the skills that we bring in and this constant learning and, okay, what is this new thing, right? So it's like, oh my goodness, now I have to learn something else. But then I'm looking at, you know, all the folks that we're presenting since I joined, is like, holy crap, these people are already figuring it out. And we have done so much on generative AI and these large language models and, you know, all these equations of how to grab content, that it's very, very exciting. I know you have questions for me. Sorry. I'm just like, these are my initial.
It's a great introduction. So let's sum up. Women Localization, the book Truly Global, and now you are the head of a platform for Procore, a global construction company, construction software.
That's right. I'm the head of growth for the company, and I sit in the product and technology organization, and our team is called Global by Design. And so Global by Design on the corporate side, to us, you're very horizontal. So we work with everybody, legal, engineering, marketing, IT, professional services, sales, all the country leaders, you know, yeah, it's fun.
My question to you would be, I guess, let's look at what's happening from the perspective of the localization manager, a team lead, right? Tools are changing fast. Skills are being rehashed. The legal is saying some things, but nobody tells me one piece of advice that I really need. What do I do?
What do you do? Okay, so
what is my best play in the situation? What are the steps I want to take to secure my future with the layoffs all around, with budgets being cut? I want to protect my team. I want to have a career in front of me. I want to be successful at what I do. And I think, Anna, you're the best person in the world to perhaps provide some guidance. What do we do in this incredible tech revolution? How do we make use of it? And how do we don't end up trampled underneath its feet?
All right, I don't know that I'm the best person in the world, but I always have opinions. So here's how I'm thinking about this. So the first thing that I would do, because I'm going to talk from the corporate side of things, okay, not the agency, but if you're in an enterprise, public or private or small company, SMB, whatever it is, and you're the head of localization. Well, I know, because I've seen some write-ups on LinkedIn, people are like, oh, it's too scary, it's not coming, it's not true. It is true, it's here, and we have to face it. And so a place to start is some ideas. So I hope that as a localization manager, you're connected to some sort of content strategy for your company. If there's no content strategy for the company, maybe there's a chief data officer. If there's no chief data officer, I'm pretty sure there's a VP or a head of legal. One of these leaders is already thinking about this, right? And it may not be coming in the right way or in an organized manner, and maybe legal gets first before the chief data officer, or marketing gets in first, but follow who is leading this and talk to them and say, hey, you know, I'm the head of localization. It doesn't matter what title you have, okay? People, like, I'm the head of localization. I'm in charge. I manage the localization for the company. And I'm very interested because I have been using NMT or been using agencies that use NMT, and I know what language, you know, models are. And we have all this content sitting in a translation management system. Take your pick, right? I would start by making these connections. Why? Because you position yourself as somebody that owns the content in all these languages, and this content is needed. You start to understand what legal is saying. Are we allowed to use this, or are we not allowed to use this? Because some companies have placed a do not use this, right? Some universities that have kids in college, they're like, no way you're going to use ChatGPT. So I would start with finding some information and some allies and see if there is any group already that's starting to bring in licenses, or if there is a content team that you could partner with. And that's why in the book, I always say, don't be just the lone translator or like siloed translators or localization managers. Need to be very connected to the content strategy, to the digital strategy, to even the heads of global engineering. That's where I would start. And then see what are they thinking, what's happening. For example, are they bringing GitHub Copilot? You know, that's pretty something that's happening around, right? Is it already being lit up for all development? All right. Another way is you can really rely on your agency also. What are they doing? I don't know, most of us, if the corporation is more than 100 million to 100 million, you know, we have pretty powerful agencies that are the top agencies in the world. What are they doing? It's coming in from so many places, right? Like Outlook plugin, Slack plugin, it's everywhere. And so another thing that you may want to do, if there's no forum to talk about this stuff, is have a mini offsite, onsite, Zoom site, whatever you can do, travel, no travel, with a couple people that are interested inside your company, and I would bring in your vendor, better be a really good vendor. The other teams that are very, very good to connect with are the vendors on your content management system. And I'm not talking about the translation management systems, but I'm talking about the GitHubs and the MindTouches and the Contentfuls and, you know, Content Stacks and all these agents, the companies, sorry. That's where I would start. Like, please don't just like, it's going to come next year. It's here. It's here. And it's so powerful. The other thing, I always hope that localizers don't say, oh, it's not my job to understand the business, or you can start asking really cool stuff, right? We're all, if you're heads of globalization, there's compliance, right? Compliance issues on some of these platforms. You can pose the questions, not just translation questions. You can start, if translations right now, we don't have it figured out. I don't have it figured out how we're going to go about it. We're going to go about it, but I still don't know exactly how. You can use it for other things. So for example, if you're trying to understand how to get in a country or what would it take, you can prompt the right questions. Don't prompt the wrong questions, but you can start prompting the right questions of, this is the compliance in Australia, and we're very successful here using some of these parameters. What would it take to get into the UK? So this is more from a strategic business perspective. This AI can really give you the globalization strategies that you never were able to hire. So it's very rare that companies have 1, 2, 3 strategies. What countries, what languages, what compliances, how would we get in? Is it a mixed model of, you know, revenue? Do we need to be through strat accounts, through partners, through pathways, through resellers, JV? ChatGPT can help you with all this research, you know? And so it's not just about the coding, the finding, the create me these test cases for internationalization. There's so many things. And I think this is why I suggest, you know, first find the allies, see what are they thinking? What are they bringing in? Are they buying licenses? And then the second thing is like, open your mind like a box, you know, like what are all the things that this is going to help you do? This is going to help you edit content. Okay, how would that work? This may help you create test cases. You know, every platform goes through thousands of test cases. The compliance issues of platforms in other countries. My platform is performing really well in these countries. What would it take to get into Japan? What issues would I find in Japan from an engineering perspective? And then you start asking the questions, right?
So outsource market research to your AI companion.
You need to be very good at asking the questions. So we have all now seen the first jobs of like prompt engineer. Right? What Terrence was doing or some of the other gentlemen were doing here, not everybody knows how to do this, right? So who is going to do this for you? Are you going to train yourself to do this for yourself? You know, we all have the little app that says, write me a poem that says that Konstantin is a great panel moderator in April, you know, and it's gonna, like, in 1 minute you have that. You have to know what prompts to ask and then keep going, keep going, keep going. A lot of people don't have researchers, but now this is gonna help you. Is it going to, the question now is the research accurate? So I think that's where you need to double check and triple check and maybe not believe everything. You can also ask, what is the source of this, right? Yeah.
Or connect to, there's an increasing number of fact-checking plugins, so they can list you the sources if you embellish your AI companion with some extra add-ons.
I hope there is the fact check of the fact check of the fact, you know, I don't know. This is gonna be fun.
And so the second question for me, and then we'll switch to the questions to the audience. I mean, this is amazing stuff, right? Find allies, hold workshops to keep being involved in the topic and also position yourself as a strategist. Have market research, strategic market research done that you couldn't do before. Now it's simpler, faster. You can come up with ROI formulas, which was usually a difficult thing, right? You can input different parameters and see what comes out. Now, what I need in terms of my team, right? So I lead the team. I have people working with me. Do I send them to training? Do I change a little bit the skill set that they have? Does it change something for me that this technology wave is out there? Should I get more technical chops, quote in your book? Should I get more communicators? What is the new setup now?
I don't know. I think just like everybody else is hitting me very hard because I was playing with it while our company was not allowing it. So our company just allowed it. And so we are in the process of getting licenses and we haven't had the workshop, right? But if you're a single localization manager, because many teams only have, let's say, a localization manager, and they don't have an engineer in the team or engineers or techies or systems folks or people that really, you know, are super innovators, and you need to find, yes, you need to find somebody. And if you cannot hire, who on your agency can help you figure this out? I think this is why I wouldn't go straight like, oh my God, I have to hire somebody. I would go first, can I partner with engineering? Engineering or the AI team in your company is already thinking about language processing. They have been, right? Because to collect all these AI data in the past to give predictive analytics and stuff like that, they have language models. So maybe you can partner with something there. I'm talking for people that are like, there's no way they're going to give me a headcount. This is why it's so important to be friends with engineers if you're a localizer, right? If you're lucky, like we are, where we have some really incredible people that are in charge of, you know, content management systems and APIs and connecting to agencies, etc. Well, these people are already texting me of like, look what I've done, look what, you know, so they naturally can come to this. There's a lot of excitement about this.
What do you provide them so that they come to you? Do you just listen? Do you give them evaluations? Is there something that you give so that they?
We haven't started. So I just asked somebody in my team, give me 3 examples, and the guy within 2 minutes gave me 3 examples, right? And the examples came in the form of changing a simple word across a massive platform. You can ask, where in this damn platform do I need to change Konstantin for drunk, as an example, right? It will tell you exactly where, right? And if you're not sitting on a CMS, this is very, very powerful. If you're not sitting on the right CMS, this is very powerful. I think this is why I'm talking first to do a workshop of like, where are you hurting the most Is it in updating vocabulary? Is it in market research? Is it in creating test cases? If you're, and I'm going to say something controversial, if you have a team of 10 contractors in, name your country or low cost location, maybe you meet with them and say, okay, what are 2 things that we can start doing so these test cases get easier and easier and easier? I think this is an evolution inside each one of the teams of, but you're going to have to use it and show some progression. Every team will start differently. It's the same way as we took us forever to get onto MT. Then NMT came in, everybody's like, whoop, NMT is so incredible. I think AI is that, you know, it's not intelligent, it's just putting the models together, right? It's like the economists putting models together. You need to know what questions to ask. What business problem are you resolving? Who are you missing in your team?
That was actually my next question, Anna. Now, if you master prompting, there's so much more that you can do except localization. You can do the rewrites, you can offer content in the target language directly from a brief without doing any localization, bypass localization. You can have inclusive language implemented, you can have standard technical English, you can have lots of other stuff, right? Even marketing campaign creation for different countries could be within your sphere of influence. Is there something like low-hanging fruit? Where would you go first?
I would go first probably to engineering and development. Usually these platforms have a large amount of technical debt. So see if you can liberate the engineers or the agencies from that. I think, you know, scanning code is a very good place to start. Creating test cases is a very good place to start. I am playing a lot with a group of friends on the weekend, which is sort of, it shows how nerds we are, of like on internationalization, you know, these plugins with Chrome or plugins for GitHub Copilot. Are they able to fix internationalization issues? And so far, we have not been able to see that. So maybe it's more on the repetitive tasks for now. That's a place to start, right? Again, I'm talking about very large companies that pull millions of words a year. You need the buy-in from legal or the chief data officer. What are we, you know, lighting up? Is it Copilot? Is it something else? Where are we using it? So many times you're going to be dependent on your IT stack and what's coming in. Try to get some licenses. Maybe the marketing agency, what you said, is already planning on piloting something fun.
All right.
That's the workshop, and that's why the business opportunity. Sometimes you get in the building through the wrong door to try to see what's inside the building. But these will eventually get better and better and better.
The question from the floor comes from Nestor Solano. What questions should one keep in mind when prompting GPT to get your globalization strategy? Any
Nestor, what's your business? What is your business? Are you like selling technology? Are you?
We'll see if
social media. I mean, the questions are going to be very different, right? And we're in a civil engineering construction world, and the questions are going to be based on that, right? So you need to know what are your company goals, look at your company mission. Those are the questions you're going to be asking if you're entering other countries.
Nestor says he's in an educational technology.
Educational technology, okay. So
let's give an example. Educational technology, what would we ask?
I'm not in educational technology, but I'm pretty sure that his chief strategy officer has some very big questions, right? And if he's in this call, I have to imagine he's in globalization. So this education technology in need of entering other countries. Maybe you're successful in one, maybe you're not successful in another one. You can start looking at why are you not successful in this other one based on these things that you've done, right? And this is why prompting needs to be very clever. You cannot ask to resolve business issues. You need to understand your business. So I don't know. What questions would you ask a researcher if you could? Those are the questions, like what's most important to you right now? So for example, for me right now, we're researching if we're going to get into Japan. Okay, in the world of construction, all the compliance, all the legalities, the way construction happens in every single country and even inside countries is done so differently per region, per precinct, etc. So that's where the prompting goes into what's your business goal. Okay, what is your goal? What are you trying to resolve? And you can grab these questions and like put in a Google Doc and start thinking through it. It's very much like a researcher's mind, I think. You need some space and time to start prompting these questions. You can ask your team, what are the 5 top things we're not cracking right now? What do we need to know? But it all needs to go towards your business. What is your business trying to achieve? If you're achieving your revenue goals, maybe you don't need such tougher questions. Maybe it's like, what's the next country we should get into? Or what are the latest technology education methodologies in the top 3 countries in the world? I don't know.
And you're teaching us to be very, very strategic. This is an important skill for anyone who wants to be successful in organizational scenario. This is amazing. I have one more question from Silvio Piscini from eBay, and then if we don't have any questions, I'll wrap up, or if somebody comes up with a good question, we'll take one more. And Silvio wants to know, what do you think about authoring directly in a language instead of translating?
I also run the content strategy team for Procore, and I did at NetApp as well for several years. And this is going to be interesting, right? Because we don't have enough authors to do the bill of materials for every single one of the tools or the product, and then forget localizing it, right? I haven't tested it out, but of course it's going to work. I was talking to somebody who is in the writing scripts in Hollywood, and they have a massive strike in Hollywood. The writers are like, strike, right? Because basically plagiarism, their jobs, their livelihood, it's like when we started seeing that somebody can paint me a picture as if I were Vincent van Gogh, right? Like big questions. I don't have the answers, but I do think that authoring is going to get impacted, and there's going to be an evolution. And if I have some of the writers in my team, I love you guys, but we're going to have to figure it out together. Authoring, I mean, who doesn't want the Gmail that you start typing and then the sentence finishes for you? I'm like, thank you. It already knows what I was going to say, right?
I'm more scared by this than anything else, because it reads my Gmail.
Yeah, I mean, all this data, right? They know exactly who we are and what we need and what we want, and I
deleted the extension. I tried it and then deleted, but probably my data is already gone. Who knows?
Yeah, and I think this is why going to the legal department or going to your chief data officer for guidelines, we need to create guidelines as to how we're going to write at scale, how we're going to develop at scale, how we're going to localize at scale. Don't do this without alignment inside your company. I don't want anybody in a straight orange jacket. Like, don't get yourselves into messes. Right now, it's the time to slow down for a minute. I know it's very exciting. You can do your own tests, at home or offline. But on behalf of, in general, I can't speak on behalf of everybody, but my recommendation would be, please align inside your company as to what is possible. And if there's a chief data officer, a VP of AI or data, align with them and tell them, look, these are some things that I would like to do. can we work on this together? What do you think? You know, because they themselves right now, we're at the stage right now where chief data officers are like, how are we going to do this for the company so that it's ethical, there's no plagiarism? How do we scale these up? I think, at least from what I see from a couple boards where I sit and where I work, that's the state where we all are. All these tools that Terrence, everybody's bringing in are coming in. Maybe, you know, if you're a freelancer or if it's awesome, you know, agency is awesome. I don't know that the corporate side, you know, if you're Google, if you're being, you know, being, they probably are more advanced, you know, that some of the other companies where we are not, our product is not, you know, creating content or hosting content. That's why it's very good to see companies that are in the CMS space already getting there, because I'm already questioning my own CMS, right?
Where is the generative AI? Anna, thank you very much for your answers. Perhaps the last question, what is your next creative project? Can we expect the next book coming from you?
Oh my goodness. So the book was just translated in Catalan. It's called Veritablement Global, and I launched it in Barcelona last month, which was awesome. I think the next, I have 4 or 5 chapters already written for the next Truly Global, but now I have to stop and put a chapter on this, you know. I don't know. It's just trying to be with everybody. I'm like fascinated like anybody else. And I keep, look at this as an opportunity. Step in. You're the one that has all these massive amount of content in all these languages. Now's the time to show off or partner with your data officers, your AI officers. Raise your hand. Want to get promoted? Gonna get more exposure, understand the company better, raise your hand and say, hey, I would love to partner with you.
Amazing. And let's take this as the recommendation, something to take to heart. And that would be the closing words of today's conference. Anna, thank you so much for being with us here. Ladies and gentlemen, please follow Anna on LinkedIn, right? Your main medium. And we're excited to try out all the recommendations that you've given us today on being successful in a people's scenario. Thank you.
Cool. I think the tools will come. It's how we position ourselves, and these tools is going to speak very loud.
Now,
awesome.
Ladies and gentlemen, this concludes today's event. We have a practice session tomorrow. Please do not join the practice session unless you've joined before. We are oversubscribed. We don't want to take any more people. It's already more than 200. Right now, we will wrap up here and close the room. But before we do, we will leave a link to a networking session. And if you have more time and you'd like to meet more people, please join this Zoom link, now thankfully put here by Paula, and we can continue the conversation here. I would like to thank all the speakers who have delivered delightful panels, discussions, insights today, demos. We've learned a lot, I think. This event showed that the industry has responded to ChatGPT and generative AI, and things are going, and the insights that we've seen today were very practical and hands-on. We can use them right now. With this, also thank you very much to the moderators, the AP Portugal team that made us a technical success today, a great conference organization. If you hold an internal event or an external event, remember who do you gonna call? AP Portugal, da-da-da-da. Voila. And that's it. Maybe see you next time in the fall. We'll take a break for the summer and return to you after more exciting technology is rolled out into the localization industry. Thank you. Do we have a music to put while people are joining the
a new audience, you should be aware that the right communication is key and choosing your partner becomes crucial. A project of expansion to international markets requires a long list of tasks and finds an answer in a one-stop destination solution, the only one capable of giving the right answers to the multiple challenges of reaching the desired markets. Save time, gain quality with AP Portugal Tech language solutions and its comprehensive range of high-quality linguistic and technological solutions that will deliver the right message to the right audience in any language. Get in touch.